Program. I'm Pascal Harter. The producer was Polly Hope. And we'll be back again next weekend here on the BBC World Service.
That was the BBC program.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. We're waking up in a new world this morning. Is everybody ready to talk about tariffs? That continues from the weekend. We have a lot at stake here, and that's about what we're about to hear in World Report and in local news as well. Welcome. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We'll make sense of all of it for you here in Manitoba. Thanks for joining us on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. 3 minutes to 6 o'clock. It's frigid. It's freezing. A high of minus 18 out there today, and winds will be northwest 30 to 50. So bundle up if you're up early and heading out. Let's say good morning to the team. Kevin Ipatebo is our YouTube producer. Waving hello to you there. Hey, Kev. Also, directing the show and covering the commute on the air, May McKillopson again today. Good morning, May. And good morning also to Marshall Hodgins, who's in for Abby this morning and is covering behind the controls. So let's go to Heather Wells to talk tariffs and other stories. Hi there.
Good morning. Yeah, so those tariffs, Donald Trump says, will kick in tomorrow, 25% on Canadian goods going into the U.S., as well as 10% on energy. Premier Rob Canoe says those tariffs are not just an attack on Canada's economy. He says they are an attack on Canada's sovereignty. And so Canoe has announced Manitoba is going to remove U.S. booze from liquor mart shelves tomorrow. We're going to hear what some Manitobans outside a liquor mart have to say about that. And Manitoba's farmers also preparing for the impact of the tariffs. Cara Burrell and her husband own a grain and vegetable farm. She says it's not just an economic hit, but it's also the impact on anxiety that farmers face. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Hundreds of comments already. We asked on Facebook, on my page, which acts as a show page during the show. Over the weekend, I posted, though, because of the tariffs. What do you think of the tariffs? And then what do you think of the counter tariffs that came in? A lot of Manitobans weighing in. Mary Swain's going to change her shopping habits. She says it's going to take me longer to shop because I need to shop Canadian. I will read the labels. Daniel Robinson saying, excellent. Trump's self-serving, divisive MAGA rhetoric has bled into Canada for too long. This is Daniel's point of view, writing, we can have different opinions here without Trump-style sensationalism and hyperbole. I'm happy to see the Canadians from all different political stripes uniting together against insanity and standing up for Canada. We did see all the parties get on the same page federally over the weekend. We'll hear a bit more about that and more coming up on World Report.
Today on Q with Tom Power. Back in the 90s, the band Bush took over the radio, Much Music, MTV. They were inescapable. Bush's frontman Gavin Rossdale will look back on the time that made him a star, and he'll tell you about playing his biggest hits on a huge Canadian tour in 2025. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Donald Trump are talking tariffs today. The two leaders will be speaking over the phone for the first time since Trump initiated the new levy on Canadian imports. The 25% tariff is supposed to be in place on Tuesday, and Canada's response is expected to top the agenda on the call. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, what are we expecting during this much anticipated phone call?
Yeah, I suspect it'll be a pivotal high-stakes call ahead of what is shaping up to be an ugly trade war. Now, Canadian officials say they hope to find a constructive path forward and convince the White House they are taking aggressive steps to secure the northern border, crack down on fentanyl, and rebalance trade. But President Donald Trump says he doesn't expect anything, quote, dramatic. He's accusing Canada of essentially freeloading off the U.S., from criticizing low military spending to unfair trade practices that block U.S. companies from expanding in Canada, while the U.S. lets Canada expand stateside. Take a listen.
Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years. They don't allow our banks. Did you know that? Canada does not allow banks to go in. If you think about it, that's pretty amazing. If we have a U.S. bank, they don't allow them to go in. Canada's been very tough on oil, on energy. They don't allow our farm products in, essentially. They don't allow a lot of things in, and we allow everything to come in. It's been a one-way street.
Now, I'm told the call is supposed to take place before 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Trump's tariffs, 25% tariffs, are supposed to take effect at midnight, and Trump himself admits Americans could feel some pain after they take effect.
Richard, do we expect today's phone call to change anything?
Yeah, a top Canadian official told me this morning they're not optimistic this call will change much, at least in the short term. So this may be what Trump would call the art of the deal. He claims both Canada and Mexico owe the U.S. a lot of money, and they're going to pay. So the question now is for how long?
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. The first shots in this trade war are just starting to land. There's also more reaction coming into Ottawa's proposed counter tariffs. Janice McGregor is in our parliamentary bureau. And Janice, what is the latest response?
Marcia, the officials briefing reporters on Canada's initial $30 billion list of targeted U.S. products said they don't actually have any early estimates to share for its projected economic impact. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc was meeting with the Bank of Canada and Canada's major financial institutions yesterday, trying to get a read on how their forecasts are going to shift now, what that means for the fight on inflation. But this early list was designed to get political attention, targeting American brands in states with vocal senators and representatives. Economist Trevor Tombe, for example, he ran some early math, and he found that exports from the vice president's home state of Ohio were hit the hardest, for example. But one Canadian industry I was checking in with yesterday said they were running their own early math, and they looked at a figure provided in the briefing and expressed some skepticism that the specific items on this list really add up to as much trade as the government has calculated. Officials also couldn't estimate how much revenue is going to come in from these counter tariffs. They don't know, for example, how many requests they're going to get from Canadian businesses that argue they should be exempt from paying them. They don't know how consumers will change their behavior and stop buying these goods. But not knowing how many billions are going to come in from these tariffs also suggests that the government's flying blind on how much it can afford to spend on helping Canadian workers and businesses about to be harmed. Yesterday, Pierre Poilievre suggested Conservatives are going to keep a close eye on that.
The tariffs must not be a tax grab. None of the money from the tariffs should stay in government coffers or be spent on unrelated government priorities.
Janice, it seems Pierre Poilievre also took part in a meeting with the Prime Minister and the other opposition leaders this weekend. Was it top secret?
Well, it wasn't on the Prime Minister's itinerary. We only found out about it when the Green Party's Elizabeth May posted about it on social media. But late yesterday, Justin Trudeau got all the opposition leaders, including Poilievre, together. And according to May, the Prime Minister said something a source told CBC News. He also told the premiers that it's become increasingly clear there's no evidence that further actions on border security are going to make a difference here. This isn't about fentanyl. It's about Canada's sovereignty.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. The trade war is having a ripple effect on the financial markets. This morning, shares across the European and Asian markets are down. There are growing economic concerns about the incoming U.S. tariffs. As the CBC's senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong reports, stocks and currency exchanges are bracing for a volatile day.
The closing bell last Friday feels like a lifetime ago. Back then, stocks sold off on news that U.S. President Donald Trump was probably going ahead with some tariffs. The Dow fell 0.8%, the S&P shed 0.5%. Then came the weekend's earthquakes.
You see the power of the tariff. I mean, the tariff is good, and nobody can compete with us because we have by far the biggest piggy bank.
Today will be the financial market's first real chance to price in the cost of a global trade war. Market analysts like Carl Shimada, chief market strategist at the financial services firm Corpay, say investors did not seem to believe this was really going to happen.
I think markets were not taking Trump seriously or literally.
In slapping sweeping tariffs on trillions of dollars worth of trade, Trump has upended decades of work to integrate global economies. Undoing that integration will come at a cost. And Shimada says markets didn't think President Trump would follow through with these kinds of threats.
The reality was that, it seemed as if whatever Trump was going to do, that it was going to be market friendly, that it would not impact how businesses, operated.
But the news won't necessarily lead to a sharp sell-off. American tech companies have driven stock market gains, and they won't be hit by Trump's tariff wars. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
CBC News has learned hundreds of sexual assault-related cases have been stayed due to unreasonable delays since 2016. Some 9 years have passed since the Supreme Court of Canada made the Jordan decision. It set new deadlines for trials to be completed, but as Julie Ireton reports, survivors and advocates say when cases time out, it discourages others from reporting to police.
I feel like my rights were taken away from me.
This woman's sexual assault case against her stepfather was stayed due to unreasonable delays. That means it was over. Her name is protected by a publication ban. She still has nightmares about the abuse she says she suffered as a young child. The defense argued her stepfather's rights to a speedy trial were violated.
My right to face him and let him know what he did to me and how much damage he caused to me was taken away from me.
When her case collapsed, so did all the bail conditions, including the order for her stepfather to stay away from her. CBC has found at least 268 sexual assault-related cases have been stayed due to unreasonable delays since 2016. Angela Marie McDougall is executive director of Vancouver's Battered Women's Support Services.
But the chilling effect that it's having is also really important in terms of victims and survivors. And then the culture of impunity that it continues to play out in the sense of those that do harm are emboldened by this lack of accountability.
The Federal Justice Department tells CBC it recognizes these stays can undermine public confidence, and it says it's working with provinces and territories to address the multiple complex underlying causes of delays. But victim advocates are now researching alternatives to the court system, including restorative justice programs. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Los Angeles is still in fire recovery mode. That was reflected in last night's Grammy Awards. The show was hosted in LA and opened with a tribute to first responders.
Look at this city getting back up off its knees. Look at these firefighters. Ain't nothing like them nowhere.
Another highlight of the evening came at the end of the show and was years in the making.
This ain't Texas. Ain't no hold 'em. So lay your cards down, 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 down. So park your Lexus.
Beyonce won Album of the Year for Cowboy Carter. It is the first time she's been awarded that prize. Beyonce also won Best Country Duo Performance for Two Most Wanted, sung with Miley Cyrus. That makes Beyonce the first Black woman to win a Grammy in a country music category. She's also the most awarded and most nominated artist in Grammy history. This is the latest from World Report, and this month we are asking you to follow World Report wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us reach new listeners and helps you stay on top of the day's top stories. I'm Marcia Young.
Grammys were pretty fun to watch last night, including that surprise performance by The Weeknd, which was statement-making to say the least. So we'll dip into that a bit this hour. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live downtown on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. This is CBC. In Manitoba, you continue to react to the tariffs. Audrey Fair saying there's no other choice but these counter tariffs, unfortunately. Artemis Morton saying as a truck driver who hauls freight between Canada and the U.S., this could mean that my job is probably finished. And Matthew T. Lawrence saying grocery stores need a whole separate section that's Canadian products only, or a store that's exclusively Canadian. So you're navigating this in terms of how you're feeling about it. You're navigating this in terms of how you think political leaders are handling this. And of course, you're navigating this because of your wallet, where you're going to spend your money. We're going to talk tariffs this hour. I know you're surprised. We will have some solid analysis for you. So let's start with that in the news and find out what perspectives our news department has been gathering on this big story. Good morning, Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's premier says Donald Trump's tariffs are not just an attack on Canada's economy.
This is also a question of national identity and national sovereignty, and we have to send a message that we are not going to bow down.
After announcing all U.S. liquor will be pulled from Manitoba Liquor Mart shelves tomorrow, Canoe says the province plans other tariff responses this week. Manitoba's farmers also preparing for the impact of the tariffs. Cara Burrell and her husband own a grain and vegetable farm. She says it's not just an economic hit, but the impact on farmers' mental health. And we're going to go to Brandon in a non-tariff story. A United Church in Brandon is planning a day of pride after being targeted with threatening messages and vandalism. We'll hear what happened coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
I don't know about you, Heather, but regarding the tariffs, the first thing when they announced counter tariffs that I did was I checked just to see in my life, what I usually like. So I checked, okay, I like to buy this non-alcoholic cider. Oh, it's made in Nova Scotia, lucky me. But then I'm like, oh, I like to buy this particular brand of footwear. Oh, nope, that's made in the States. And then some of the things were, made in countries other than the U.S., but they were shipped through the U.S. So there's so many different ins and outs to all of this, right?
There really is. Yesterday I was in a grocery store in the produce center section, and there were two women who were discussing, what can we still buy? We should just buy Canadian, but what here in the produce section can we buy?
Yep. Big threads about ketchup, mustard, and orange juice, just in case you're curious.
And some ketchup, you have to look closely because some is made here, like talking about the Heinz brand.
Yep.
Some of Heinz ketchup is made in Canada. But when they run out of that, they ship their American-made here. So you do have to check carefully.
So many questions. So much for us to really explore together and understand together in the days ahead. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Heather starting us off as she always does. All right, let's get into the weather forecast. Abby is off today, so I'm going to cover your weather. And there's not a ton to say except it's cold. We're a ton of layers out there in Winnipeg for sure, across southern Manitoba and actually the whole province. Very cold. Winnipeg right now is minus 20. It is cloudy. Today we're only going to be around minus 18, and the wind, unfortunately, is going to be northwest 30 to 50, whipping at your face, with wind chill will feel like minus 34. Brandon going to be a chance of flurries today. Your high minus 20, and up in Thompson a high of minus 22 with a mix of sun and cloud. There is a cold weather warning for one part, an extreme cold warning for Brochet into Dooley Lake, and that's the same as last week. Still for you guys up there, minus 45 is what it's going to feel like with those dangerous wind chill values. So cover up. It is winter after all. 6:14 right now, and May McKillop is in with a look at our morning commute. Good morning, May.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Looking pretty chilly out there. I know I was a little cold on my drive in this morning. We're going to want to look up for some slippery conditions. Nothing's, no big closures or delays that I'm hearing about in the city so far. And just looking at highway conditions on Manitoba highways 511, we're seeing a little bit of snow-covered conditions and some reduced visibility today, I think, from some of that light dusting of snow blowing around in the wind. Anything that you're seeing along your commute that you want to pass along to your fellow commuters, let me know. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, let's elaborate on what Heather just mentioned in the news about Manitoba farmers who are bracing for this impact of the 25% tariffs and what that will mean for their business with the States. This could lead to a major disruption of trade with Manitoba's largest markets for pork specifically. That industry creates 23,000 jobs with no other options for export of live animals. It could cost our economy and jobs. CBC's Aaron Broman over the weekend spoke with Rick Bergman, as you may have heard in the news. Rick is the vice chair of the Manitoba Pork Council and a hog farmer, and she's asking how he feels about implementing these tariffs.
The two countries have worked so well together in the past as our farm, and a lot of our neighbors are in the same situations. And we've been exporting baby pigs to the United States for over 35 years. And we've done that because a lot of American farmers have been reaching out to us over the decades. They've said, hey, you've got something that we like, and can we buy it from you? And we say, sure. Really good, solid business arrangements have been made, again, over the decades. And so our farm plus many, many other farms are really going to be impacted by this. So the proposed tariff is going to be impactful to the American purchaser as well, because now, number one, this product costs more for them to buy, And I mean, if they don't buy the animal which they need, now they've got an empty barn, which is not good either, because they need to make a living.
Why the farmers there were asking for the baby pigs from Manitoba?
A lot of the American producers in the Midwest, I'll say, value receiving an animal that has very good health. If they are healthy, then they grow well. That would be the big nugget here, where we've been able to carve out a very good relationship with the American producers because, again, the quality of the animals that we produce here.
And so then the pigs are raised there for slaughter.
Right. Yeah. So it's a very integrated marketplace where, we'll send out, 25 or 28 day piglets into, for example, Iowa, and they're raised on American family farms, fed American grains. Then they're processed there. And ironically, a lot of that meat then comes back into the Manitoba and the Canadian marketplace in many of the retail stores.
What will a 25% tariff mean for that relationship or that process?
I mean, 25%, that's a huge, huge number, which would decimate and be very impactful to a lot of the farms. So when I say impactful, depending on how long this economic fight would be, it could easily shut down family farms here. And it would also shut down family farms in the U.S. as well. So really nobody wins whatever pointless gamemanship, if you will.
And are you worried for the future of your farm?
Yeah, definitely. So again, we look at the number of animals that we move into the U.S. every year, and that's a big significant market for us. And again, if that is disrupted to the point of what we seemingly are getting into, absolutely, there's a lot of concern right now on how this is going to unravel. So a big concern, yes.
Can you quantify that at all, just to kind of put it in perspective? How much you send over the border?
Our farm, and again, like in Manitoba, there's about 3 million pigs that leave our province every year for going into the U.S. And so we're a small part of that. But our 25 or 35,000 pigs that we move into the U.S., that sale of those animals keep our gas tanks full and allows us to be in business. It allows us to pay our employees. It allows us to be involved in the community and so on. So if that tap gets shut off, not only will our farm be very negatively impacted, it's the trucking companies, it's the community centers, it's the towns in the area, it's the dealerships that sell vehicles. Like this one domino. If it goes down, it will be extremely impactful. Again, not only to our farms, but again to many other businesses that benefit from our farms being economically sound and healthy.
That's Rick Bergman, the vice chair of the Manitoba Pork Council and hog farmer. He spoke with CBC's Aaron Broman over the weekend about the impact of tariffs and his concerns moving forward. We have a guest to analyze this in a moment, but I want to first set this up with a couple more comments from here in Manitoba at 6:20 a.m. on our Monday morning. We're all absorbing this news together. We were asking on Facebook over the weekend, how do you feel about the tariffs, the counter tariffs? Laura Devlin saying she's looking at a bigger picture. She says this is economic warfare. We can't fight a war on tariffs. This is about our sovereignty. Canada will reorganize and realign. Trump has an appetite for power, as he did with his businesses, and he is seeking a hostile takeover of Canada. This is Laura widening out with her concerns. Sandra Bender saying, I'm glad our leaders in Canada and Manitoba are standing up for us as a nation. Rosie Goodman saying, similar to what the first listener said, there's so many of you missing the big picture. He wants our water. That's the long game. And finally, Brian Buring saying, I'm returning a couple couple of made in the U.S. purchases to Costco. So people not only changing how they shop, but maybe changing what they've bought if they can make returns this morning. As individually, we all try to process what is happening here. Well, let's widen out even further and look at the political response. Leaders across the country continue to weigh in on the tariff battle with the U.S. So Saturday, U.S. President Donald Trump announcing he's moving ahead with these 25% tariffs on Canadian goods. Also, just for specifics here, a 10% tariff on Canadian energy imports, and it all begins tomorrow. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in case you did miss the full response, did say his government will impose a slew of retaliatory tariffs, and multiple provinces are also taking action. You heard Heather saying that in our LCs, that will start in Manitoba. American-made liquor will be off the shelves starting tomorrow. Now, let's look at across the board how all the politicians have come out this weekend. Joining us via Zoom this morning, Dwayne Brad is with us, professor of political science at Mount Royal University. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Marcy.
So I want to move right to the political response. The PM gave a speech Saturday. Let's start with him. I have a lot of people that were praising what he had to say. What did you make of his tone, and what would you say, who was his message for?
I would praise him as well. I thought it was a very strong speech, and it was very measured. It was firm. It was resolute. He laid out clearly the actions that Canada is going to take. As far as the audience was concerned, I think some of it was the Canadian audience to show what our response is, but a lot of it was aimed at the Americans, not at the U.S. government. It was aimed at the American people, and he took pains to walk through a lot of the political and military partnership over the years, from fighting together in World War I and World War II and Korea and Afghanistan, to helping the U.S. after 9/11 when they diverted flights to Canada, most notably in Gander, Newfoundland, to sending firefighters to California just last week. So it was distinguishing between the Trump administration and the American people. He let Canada know that we were going to face pain. He let the Americans know that they were going to face pain as well. He didn't demonize the U.S. He did not demonize the American government as much as he may have wanted to. So it was firm, it was resolute, it was measured, and it wasn't just in the statement. It was in the question and answers as well.
May I ask you what you think of that strategy, the specific strategy, not of the tone of this, but of also speaking to the American people, almost like, hang on a moment here, let's talk about our relationship between the two countries.
I think that's the best strategy. We're using every lever that we can. It's tough to use logic and reason with Donald Trump because this is unreasonable and irrational. What will change his mind, what will cause a reversal in policy, is the effect that this is going to have on the American people when they realize that the price of gas is going to go up and the price of vegetables is going to go up and the price of all toilet paper is going to go up. When job losses start to occur, make it clear who is responsible for this, and that is Donald Trump.
If I may interject there, because it's interesting what you're saying. What may change his mind, because of course, if he feels like this is short-term gain for a longer-term, stronger America, where he has other, negotiates in this way to try to bring manufacturing back, for just one example, to the main floor of the towns and cities across America. He sees this as a long game way to do that. But that's of course the big question. I want to know what you think of the comments I read.
And that is assuming that is the long strategy here, that this is about manufacturing jobs. The statement was about fentanyl, but that is a legal pretext. This is not about border security. He's also talked about how the Americans subsidize Canada and how this will make the Americans rich because tariffs go into the treasury, not knowing that American people pay this. Or is this about annexing Canada? Is this because Canada has treated the U.S. horribly over the years? Like, the rationale keeps changing over and over again, which makes it very difficult in how to respond. I'd be very curious to see what message Trudeau will give when he actually talks to Trump today.
You're absolutely right to point out that moving target of motivation for this. Let's get to what we heard so far from other leaders. So Pierre Poilievre spoke this weekend as well. I did see his message, but for those that missed it, can you say what he said, the Conservative leader?
Yeah, basically reiterating what Trudeau said, that we need to retaliate. He even praised Trudeau at times. He did call for the recall of Parliament. Now, he says that is to provide a unified front against the United States, but he didn't like prorogation at all. And I wonder if why he wants to recall Parliament is to bring down the government. He's been unclear on that. Bear in mind, in the middle of this international crisis, we're in the middle of a domestic political vacuum. Prime Minister Trudeau announced his intent to resign a month ago, but a new Liberal leader won't be chosen for another month. We're currently prorogued. There will likely be an election in April, but Poilievre wants an election now. Doug Ford in Ontario called an election to deal with Donald Trump. So we've got some domestic political issues going on at the same time that we have this international crisis. But so far, the messaging has all been the same towards the U.S.
How important is that? I mean, I think the average Canadian might have breathed out when they saw all the leaders coming to their various microphones and kind of being on that same strong Canadian page. But how important is that in your view?
I think that is important. Even Danielle Smith, who refused to sign on to a previous statement, did acknowledge on the weekend that this is due to Donald Trump. It's the first time I've heard her publicly criticize Donald Trump. Now, she's not fully on board. Maybe she's got one foot in the Team Canada approach, because the rest of her letter or op-ed in the National Post was about we need to de-escalate the rhetoric, we need to use diplomacy, which was an implicit criticism, retaliation, and that the solution is to build more pipelines across the country. In other words, all of her pet projects are now the best way of dealing with Trump. But she is much closer to Team Canada than she was in the past. But everybody else, I think, has really taken a prominent stance. Now, some of it is simply symbolic. Removing alcohol, Kentucky bourbon, California Cabernet off of our shelves may make us feel good, but it's a small drop in the bucket to the hundreds of billions of dollars of trade between the two countries. Booing the American national anthem may make us feel good.
Yeah, I saw that at some of the hockey games, yeah.
Yeah, trying to buy Canadian goods at the grocery store. Sure, when it comes to coffee or breakfast cereal or potato chips, but try to find lettuce and fruits and vegetables. And many of the products, we don't even know where the rules of origin kick in. This is going to cause a lot of pain starting tomorrow. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to lose their jobs in the next 2 weeks in Canada and the U.S. You're going to push Canada into a recession, the U.S. possibly into a recession, and this never had to occur. This is incredible pain on both sides of the border. The most serious economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst Canada-U.S. relationship since prior to World War I, and it's due to one man and the person and the people behind him.
Thank you very much, Dwayne, for setting us up to cover obviously this historic moment in our country and in North America. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
So throughout the morning, we'll be talking, that was Dwayne Bratt, professor of political science at Mount Royal University, and we'll be talking about how you're affected here in Manitoba. We would love it if you would fill the listener line. Maybe if we have enough calls, we'll just even open it up live. But right now, let's give you the listener line. It's 204-788-3205. What are you thinking? How are you feeling about the tariffs? How may you be impacted? What questions do you have? 204-788-3205. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's minus 20 right now. We're not going to warm up a whole lot today. It's going to be windy and cold, a high of minus 18. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will speak with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau this morning about the 25% tariffs the U.S. plans to impose tomorrow. Trump spoke with reporters last night on his way back to the White House, lashing out at Canada.
Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years. They don't allow our banks. And you know that Canada does not allow banks to go in. If you think about it, that's pretty amazing. If we have a U.S. bank, they don't allow them to go in. Canada's been very tough on oil, on energy. They don't allow our farm products in, essentially. They don't allow a lot of things in, and we allow everything to come in. It's been a one-way street.
But Trump says he doesn't expect anything dramatic to come from this morning's conversation between himself and Trudeau this morning. Well, goodbye, Kentucky bourbon. Goodbye, California wine. U.S. liquor products are being removed from Manitoba Liquor Mart shelves tomorrow. Premier Rob Canoe says it is just one response to the sweeping tariffs that will be imposed by the U.S. on Canadian imports.
If our large trading partner to the south begins kicking sand in our face, then we have to stick up for ourselves and we have to push back.
Now, American booze, as it disappears from the store shelves, has generated some reaction outside the Liquor Mart in Winnipeg's Osborne Village. Herb Neufeld doesn't think the move will accomplish much.
It's a really sort of symbolic act. It'll be noticed. Will it shake things up in the U.S.? Probably not at all.
Peter Mason, meanwhile, suggests a stronger response. He says Canada should cut off gas, cut off water, cut off electricity. Manitoba exports about $15 billion worth of goods and services to the United States every year. Now, Manitoba farmers also are bracing for impact. Chris Davison is head of the Canola Council of Canada. The industry produces 18 million metric tons of canola products, most of which goes to the U.S.
Farmers will unfortunately feel the impact of this in a number of different ways. In terms of the marketing options that they have for their crop and the potential price that they can receive for that. So the impacts will be very real in terms of cash flow and profitability.
Now, as I mentioned, those Canadian counter tariffs will also begin tomorrow. Davison says it is unclear how they will benefit Canadian farmers. We will have much more on this story throughout the day, right here on CBC Radio 1. You can also read the latest on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Heading home to Gaza.
Did you hear the bombing?
Through a WhatsApp video, a Palestinian refugee in Winnipeg keeping in touch with an old friend in Gaza, Hala Kofa, says since the ceasefire, family and friends have started returning to their homes and finding nothing but rubble and human remains. Despite the horrors they face, she says they are optimistic in rebuilding their lives in Rafah.
Some of them in Rafah had all their houses demolished, and some of them had bits and pieces of their houses left. So they are all supporting each other and staying with whatever is remaining.
Kafa says in the midst of all of it, people are celebrating the ceasefire. A United Church in Brandon is prouder than ever, even in the face of vandalism and harassment. Brandon's Knox United Church is known as a safe and loving place for the 2S LGBTQ+ community. But recently it's met some pushback for its advocacy, like nasty messages online and threatening phone calls. Laura Cruikshank is with the church's Affirm committee.
We're seeing more reaction to some of the events we might hold, to some of the things that are going on in the community. People are concerned about some of the hateful kind of speech around people in the 2S LGBTQIA+ community.
Cruikshank says the church has adjusted some of its safety protocols. Well, the Grammy Awards were held in Los Angeles last night, honoring the best in music, and a surprise performance by Toronto's The Weeknd. The Weeknd has been openly critical of the Grammys in the past. Among Canadians who won last night, producer David Hamelin sharing Album of the Year Grammy for Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
We're going to try, if we can, it's a busy morning, but we're going to try to get some of that weekend music on for you. 6:35 a.m. the time right now. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining our team here at Information Radio. You're on CBC this Monday morning, and it is cold. Let's get into your regional forecast here. -20, cloudy in Winnipeg. Winds are northwest at 20. Today will be around -18. Strong winds northwest up to 50, and those gusts will make it feel at times like minus 34 with the wind chill this morning. Our actual high in Winnipeg is minus 18. In tonight's forecast for Winnipeg, clearing, low minus 27. It's just going to be cold and frigid all week, pardon me. Tomorrow, some sunshine, a clear day, a high of minus 18 again, and then some snow moving in for Wednesday. Brandon, you're pretty similar to Winnipeg. Right now, you're light snow and drifting snow with minus 23 degrees. 30% chance of those flurries continuing and gusty winds this morning, a high of minus 20. Clear tonight for you, low minus 29, so even colder than the city here of Winnipeg. And in Brandon, a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow, high minus 18. You are also expecting snow on Wednesday. Finally, up to Thompson, drifting snow right now and minus 24. And for you today, a high of minus 22 with a chance of light snow continuing this morning. Winds will be a little lighter than down south here. Winds will be northwest at 20. Tonight, partly cloudy, low minus 28 in Thompson. And tomorrow, mainly sunny and a high of minus 20. And it doesn't look like you're going to get that same snow system that we're expecting, because on Wednesday, you've just got cloudy periods and a high right around minus 15. Let's go to May McKillop, who's here with our commute.
Hey, good morning.
Hey.
Nothing. I haven't heard anything about conditions here in the city of Winnipeg. I noticed roads were looking okay when I drove in this morning. If that's not the case for you, please let me know. And just looking at 511 at some of the highway conditions, it's looking partly covered, particularly northeast outside of the city towards Lac du Bonnet area. Some partly covered conditions. I can see on Manitoba Highways 511 that the plows are moving along. And as well, just heading east to eastern side of the province, it's looking like the further east you go, the less visibility you're having on the highways. So there's some partly covered conditions, but through Treeherne and Deloraine, particularly just like in the southwestern area of the province, it's looking like we're getting some issues with visibility. If you're listening from wherever you are in your commute and you wanted to give us an update, I'd love to hear how the conditions are today. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, May. Let's go to Neil Kumar now, who's filling in on business news for Crystal Lee Ramlakan this morning. Hi there, Neil.
Hi, Marcy.
So obviously we're talking about U.S. President Donald Trump and these tariffs. What's happening in the markets? Why don't we start with them this morning?
So right now, the Dow futures have dropped by 600 points. Asia-Pacific markets are sliding and trading lower, and European markets are sinking. Also, Donald Trump now has his sights set on England and the European Union. Trump has suggested he'll bring in similar levies on items from the EU. What could these new charges mean for the UK? Well, the UK economy will be hit by the indirect effects of the White House policy. Firstly, tariffs are likely to lead to a general slowdown in global trade volumes, which will depress economic growth, particularly for an open economy such as the UK. We're expecting North American markets to follow suit today.
Speaking of the UK, some London residents are living in a way that helps them avoid insane rents, I understand.
Yes, there are people who have lived in a cathedral that was deserted over the past 2 years, with each occupant an electrician, a sound engineer, and a journalist paying a monthly fee to live in the priest's quarters. The cathedral is managed by Live-In Guardians, a company that finds occupants for disused properties, including schools, libraries, and pubs across Britain. The residents' so-called property guardians pay a fixed monthly license fee, which is usually much lower than the typical rent in the same area. According to Arthur Duke, who's the founder and managing director of Live-In Guardians, applications to become one of these guardians are going through the roof, with more than these people in their late 30s and 40s signing on than in the past. He says people are looking for cheaper ways to live due to the impact that comes from the cost of living.
And to the business of sports this morning, you have a story about this weekend. We learned that the new WNBA expansion team awarded to Toronto has found their first general manager.
Yes, so the Toronto Tempo hired Monica Wright-Rogers as the team's first general manager. The 36-year-old joins Toronto, and this comes after serving as an assistant general manager with the Phoenix Mercury for the past 2 seasons. She played 7 seasons in the WNBA with the Minnesota Lynx and the Seattle Storm. Her accolades include winning 2 WNBA championships with the Minnesota Lynx as a player. She was also drafted 2nd overall in the 2010 WNBA draft, so she brings a lot of great experience to the Toronto expansion team.
And then what's happening in the rest of the market so far this morning?
So in Europe, Germany, UK, and France are all down, and in Asia, Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all down.
All right, thank you. We'll talk to you again tomorrow if you're still filling in, but nice to have you with us today.
Yes, I'll be here. Very welcome. Thank you so much.
So we will touch base with Neil Kumar again tomorrow morning. Neil is with Business News filling in this morning for Crystal Lee Ramlakan.
Here's to the bold. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it.
6:42 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio on CBC. Hopefully your Monday morning's going well. If you have not plugged the car in, run out and plug it in and give it a chance because it's that cold. In Winnipeg right now, -20, and it's going to stay cold with strong winds and a high of -18. Still ahead on the show this morning, by the way, after 7 o'clock, it's Black History Month, and a common misconception is that Canada never took part in harming the Black community like our neighbors to the south. But not true. We're going to talk to an Afro-Indigenous educator to try and bust some of those myths. So we have that coming up for you after 8 o'clock on the show. Well, let's take you to the Grammys to hear a little more music from the weekend. As you heard Heather at the end of her newscast mentioning, last night the Grammys were awarded and The Weeknd was on stage. So why is this a big deal for the Canadian artist? Because he had previously vowed to never grace the award show again, to never be on stage at the Grammys again. He put up a boycott suggesting it was an unfair system of how they were deciding who was getting Grammys. It wasn't representative. It wasn't inclusive of all artists, and boycott the Grammys. So last night what happened was Academy CEO Harvey Mason got on stage and was talking about that criticism directly from The Weeknd, put up actually all the headlines and the big banner. You could see, the news headlines. And he talked about that moment. I think it was 3 years ago when this was really developing. And then he went through the changes that he says the Grammys have made to try and respond to some of the concerns that were raised by The Weeknd and others. And then the big surprise moment, so you could kind of hear the crowd shuffle when he said, and now something, this is how he introduced him. He said, here's something I thought I would never say again. Here is The Weeknd performing live at the Grammys. And so The Weeknd came out and did some tunes last night. So this morning we thought we'd play The Weeknd. So last night he did Timeless and Cry for Me, but we this morning for you pulled Dancing in the Flames on CBC.
Traffic dies while we are racing home. Melted lights cover the open road. I hope you make it, 'cause I've been chasing another odyssey. Oh, I can't wait to see your face crash when we're switching lanes. My love's beyond the pain, but if I miss the break, we're dancing in the flames. It's indescribable. The world can't heal, they say on the radio. So grab the wheel, want you to be in control. We're dodging headlights, and you say hold tight, another odyssey. I can't wait to see your face crash when we're switching lanes. My love's beyond the pain, but if I miss the break, we're dancing in the flames. It's indescribable. Everything's faded, we barely made it. The fire's raging, but you're still beautiful, and it's amazing, 'cause I can taste it, our final odyssey. I can't wait to see your face crash when we're switching lanes. My love's beyond the
Dancing in the Flames from The Weeknd. The Weeknd on stage at the Grammys last night. What a surprise after the boycott. Lots of Grammy moments being made last night. If you missed the whole show, I would highly recommend, even if you just can see one thing, go back to see Best New Artist category and watch all the live performances, because all the Best New Artist nominees performed last night, and wow, what a category. Doechii, amazing. Also, Chappell Roan, who won last night, of course, gave a beautiful performance last night, just fun and full of life, and Pink Pony Club, of course, is what she did. But I loved the message she sent after. She talked about being, trying to be an artist, and at one point saying things were going well, and then all of a sudden, she wasn't making money from that, and she had no coverage at all, and she'd sort of missed years of her life because she'd been discovered very young, and so then she was trying to get back into kind of a regular job world and had no benefits and coverage, and health insurance was a nightmare for her. And so she kind of really implored, music studios to do better to support young artists. So that was another moment at the Grammys last night, but lots of them. I mean, the tribute to Quincy Jones and the harmonica from Stevie Wonder. I loved that. Man can still play. And just really lovely moments making tribute to the aftermath of the fires in California. Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars doing a duet. But many moments from the Grammys. If you want to check it out, of course, they're all online, and you can read the highlights on cbc.ca.
CBC Music Live. Head into the big venues, intimate concert halls, and small stages. Celebrate live music the way it was meant to be. Share in an unmistakable energy of being shoulder to shoulder with music fans and face to face with some of Canada's best musicians.
It's such an honor and a pleasure to play here.
CBC Music Live, brand new season. And catch past episodes right now on CBC Gem.
Tanya Mosley didn't even know she had a sister until she went missing. Her sister, Anita, left home in 1987 and never returned. Now Tanya, along with the help of her sister's son, Antonio, is determined to find out what happened. I'm Kathleen Goldhar, and this week on Crime Story, one woman's search for her long-lost sister. Crime Story, available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's 11 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcuser. Maybe you're watching on YouTube this morning. Thanks for joining us. I hope you had a great weekend. Let's get into the tariff conversation once again from a different angle, though, and hear a bit of what Trudeau had to say. This trade battle is now firmly underway. Saturday, U.S. President Donald Trump made good on his threats. He announced tariffs against all Canadian products. These would start tomorrow, 25%, except energy, which will be 10%. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada will hit back, and so he did, putting out that list of counter tariffs, as we've been telling you. Here's a little bit more, though, of what Trudeau had to say.
Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods. And as part of our response, we are considering, with the provinces and territories, several non-tariff measures, including some relating to critical minerals, energy, procurement, and other partnerships.
So Canada's response is in two stages. Tomorrow, there will be tariffs against $30 billion worth of American products. You can find the list online at cbc.ca. And then in 3 weeks, more tariffs on $125 billion worth of goods. We're going to talk about what the economic impact will mean in a moment, but let's get back to your comments, because you've been weighing in like crazy. There's hundreds of them from Manitoba on my Facebook page. I asked over the weekend as this was all developing. This one's really interesting because this comment comes from Jim Rondo, who was 17 years in NDP MLA in this province and had helped ministerial portfolios for industry, economic development and mines, as well as he was Minister of Science, Energy, Tech and Mines as well. And he was a MLA, as we mentioned, for 17 years. So Jim Rondo said we need to expand our markets. We also need to have the euro become the common currency of exchange versus the US dollar. And finally, we need to identify the 5 or 6 critical minerals that we ship to the USA and stop this. We can pay the companies for the minerals and just keep them in storage. Finally, we need to establish an export tariff on electricity and gas and oil. So that coming from Jim Rondo with, of course, a differently informed opinion than others might have. Rick Fikes weighing in, there's no good solution. But the theory is that some form of answer is required, and cutting off imports would trigger awards. So this is the median approach. Well, as I mentioned, let's talk about the economic impact here. We have Fen Hampson with us via Zoom, Professor of International Affairs at Carleton University and co-chair of the High-Level Expert Group on Canada-U.S. Relations. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good to be with you, Marcy.
Thank you so much for being here. You heard me mentioning some of the comments coming in, including from former MLA here, long time in Manitoba, who was in charge of industry. Is there any way, I want to start with this, is there any way at this point to predict, job losses that are possible in this country because of this?
Well, there have been a number of studies that have been done by Canadian economists, by American economists, and those estimates, and it's all kind of contingent on, how long does the tariff war last, right? So if it's going into weeks and months, we could expect to see something like 600,000 fewer jobs, which will push unemployment up to 10% or higher. Right now, it's around 6%. So that's a pretty sizable increase in unemployment. It will be felt most acutely in those sectors of the economy that do a lot of business with the United States. Automobile sector, parts and assembly, I think they're going to take a real hit. That's largely based in Ontario. Energy sector less so, for the following reason that yes, there's a 10% tariff there on energy exports, but the producers that we sell our oil and gas to in the United States can't substitute it with oil from pretty much anywhere else. It's heavy oil. And those pipelines are already in place. There isn't infrastructure to bring it from somewhere else. So they're kind of stuck buying it at a higher price. And the question is, who pays the 10%? Do we get stuck with the bill, or does the purchaser get stuck with the bill, as say the refineries in Texas and Louisiana?
In terms of, I'm just going to interject because you brought up the who gets stuck with the bill question. I want to read you a comment that a longtime business owner here in Manitoba wrote in, and I want to see what your sense is of this as we look at how the feds have responded. Here, Rick Koss wrote in, I would like to see a commitment from Ottawa to use all or most of the tariffs collected to support the many businesses that will be severely impacted by the trade war, similar to the COVID supports, but in this case, the money wouldn't come from our pockets, but those of the companies exporting into Canada. Individual consumers will be impacted, but not to the same degree. We have choices to buy alternates or not buy at all, but businesses whose markets are primarily in the United States, don't have the same options. What is your thought of that? Some kind of a response from Ottawa to kind of support businesses through this time. Do you think that's likely?
Well, there were meetings on the weekend by our government officials to do just that. We obviously have the experience from COVID of providing, various forms of grants and loans. But I think, the real question is going to be, if this is going to be a long tariff war and, those tariffs don't come off, right, anytime soon. Providing support to businesses that are no longer viable is, not a very attractive option, to be blunt, because you can write them a check, but if they're going to go out of business anyway, that's not money well spent, right? And that also applies to a loan you might give them. To be sure, you want to help the workers in those firms, and we do have unemployment insurance. I mean, those are mechanisms that are already in place. I think there's also a lot of concern based on the COVID experience. We're already hearing it, that if the feds start shoving money out the door and not doing it very carefully, there are going to be abuses of the system. People are going to game the system. So, how do you manage it in a way that, the money is spent where it needs to be spent? But that's going to be a tricky one, and it's all kind of contingent on, where's this going, right? And I think our smaller firms are much more vulnerable than our big firms in the energy sector or the automobile sector. They can absorb the shock, but if you're a small company that's making fences that you sell in the United States, or roofing materials, and you have 100 employees and 80% of your business is on the other side of the border, you're in big trouble.
We have the Manitoba Chamber on to walk us through some of those local concerns a little bit later in the program. Fen, obviously won't be the last time we're speaking. Thank you very much for your time this morning and being on our program here.
My pleasure.
That is Fen Hampson, professor of international affairs at Carleton University, but also co-chair of the high-level expert group on Canada-U.S. relations. Looking for silver linings here, guys, but we're still, you always like to do that in stories. Where's the hope? But this is a very much an active developing story where we have more questions, I think, than answers this morning. Let's go to Heather Wells for what we do know in terms of reaction here and how people are poising in Manitoba and for other news headlines. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, Premier Rob Canoe says Donald Trump's tariffs are not just an attack on Canada's economy. He says they're an attack on Canadian sovereignty. Canoe has announced Manitoba will remove U.S. booze from Liquor Mart shelves tomorrow as part of the province's response.
This means that we are going to be taking $80 million out of the U.S. economy. This is $80 million that we won't be spending in the United States of America.
Now, Manitoba farmers are preparing for the impact. Cara Burrell and her husband own a grain and vegetable farm. She is now looking at new ways to diversify her income so she's not relying just on what her farm produces. We'll hear more from her and other reaction coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
So there is an extreme cold warning for Brochet and Dooley Lake continuing today with wind chills that'll feel like minus 45. Winnipeg, we're going to feel like minus 34 with the wind. Winds will be northwest 30 to 50. Our high is minus 18. Right now it's cloudy and minus 20 in the city. The commute so far, we haven't heard of anything major to pass along, so be careful out there. Obviously, winter could be a little bit slick underfoot and obviously cold if you're waiting for the bus. But beyond that, we don't have anything major to report. 788-3093. If we're missing something, please let us know on the commuter line. In the next hour of Information Radio, we're going to talk to an Afro-Indigenous educator about common myths that Canadians have when it comes to Black history in this country. So stay tuned for that. Also, coming up, we're going to meet two Winnipeg women who helped Canada's national para-hockey team score their way to the World Championships. And a really nice feature story coming at 7:40 for you. And at this time last year, the Winnipeg School Division changed some class schedules to address absenteeism. A year on, we'll have the WSD superintendent in live to find out what's been effective. Stay tuned.
Today on The Current.
And it's a very small community of 300 people, completely isolated in that we don't have road access.
Labrador is a place of dramatic coastlines and sweeping barrens, but for the Inuk photographer Eldred Allen, it also means home and the people who live there. Eldred Allen on showing the rest of Canada the real beauty of Nunatsiavut, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. We are approaching a make-or-break moment in the looming trade war between Canada and the U.S. Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau will talk tariffs during a phone call scheduled for later this morning. The U.S. president appears determined to follow through with the 25% levy on Canadian goods. And as Katie Simpson reports from Washington, Trump admits this move could hurt Americans.
A defiant President Donald Trump pumped his fist and waved at reporters as he returned to Washington, walking across the south lawn of the White House.
Mr. President, does it matter to you that Canadians are angry in this moment?
While he ignored that question, it is already clear he's ready to impose a hostile and unprecedented economic act. Tariffs so steep they're expected to sow chaos and uncertainty across the North American trading relationship. He will take phone calls, though, from Canada's Prime Minister and Mexico's President, but he's lowered the bar for expectations of any kind of breakthrough.
I don't expect anything very dramatic. We put tariffs on. They owe us a lot of money, and I'm sure they're going to pay.
Starting Tuesday, the U.S. will impose 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, though Canadian energy will be hit at a lower 10% rate. China will also face a new 10% tariff as well. Trump says he's open to increasing the rates, given the Canadian and Mexican threats to retaliate.
Well, it could happen. If they do anything, we will. Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years.
Trump openly admits this may cause temporary pain, especially for American consumers, but insists it will be worth it in the long run. A hard sell, especially since Trump's re-election campaign primarily focused on making life more affordable. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Parliament is still prorogued, but it appears the Prime Minister is keeping opposition leaders up to date. Green Party leader Elizabeth May says all the leaders met virtually yesterday evening, and she says they agree with the Prime Minister. These U.S. tariffs are about Canada and its sovereignty, and now is not the time to back down. Provinces and territories are already fighting back against the U.S. tariffs. Some are pulling American alcohol products from their shelves. The CBC's Yvette Brand has that story.
Bottles of Jack Daniels are removed from shelves at this Vancouver liquor store. Ravi Kalan is chair of the Cabinet Committee leading BC's tariff response.
It's sad to see that we're here today.
Manitoba liquor marts will pull American products by Tuesday. In Ontario, the LCBO is scrubbing American products from its catalog. Chris Swanger, president of the Distilled Spirits Council of the U.S., says all this affects $1 billion in cross-border booze trade.
It's going to hurt, but hopefully cooler heads will prevail with our government in quick order.
At this Vancouver bar, the manager, Brendan Wooldridge, says they will use Canadian spirits once their American bottles run dry.
It feels kind of like we're caught in a schoolyard fight and a little childish and disappointing, and we're just hoping that this kind of gets resolved quickly.
For provinces still stocking U.S. liquor, tariffs that kick in soon will push the prices up, even if they are still on the shelf. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
The U.S. president is threatening tariffs could also be imposed on goods from the EU. And European markets are responding negatively. EU leaders meeting today in Brussels were supposed to be discussing defense. But as Crystal Gomansing tells us, those talks are expected to shift to ways leaders can protect EU economies.
The worry is that this is yet another headwind that pushes the EU into recession.
Mohammed Al-Arian is president of Queen's College at University of Cambridge and chief economic advisor at Allianz, an international financial services provider. He says European leaders will try to determine if the threatened U.S. tariffs could come in a single blow or in multiple rounds.
And the difference between the two is enormous in terms of economic, financial, and political consequences.
When markets opened, European automakers, including VW, dropped by more than 5%. What happens next will be up to the European Union. It handles trade policy for the bloc of nations. Radek Sikorski is the Polish foreign minister.
The Commission will do what it has always done, which is to answer in kind. It's the last thing we want, but a response is inevitable.
The 27 nations combined, he says, represents 440 million consumers.
Tariffs are always bad.
We need America and America needs us.
European leaders meeting in Brussels are unified in saying there are no winners in a trade war. But it appears they'll have little time to craft an agreed economic defense plan. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
A record rainfall has triggered floods in Australia. A roadway in North Queensland has been washed out. At least one person is dead. Thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes. Rivers and reservoirs throughout the region are overflowing.
When the river bank broke, it just came down Mystic Avenue and wiped out one side of the street. Just everyone went underwater. Everyone's got water through their houses. There's a lot of people down there with no food, no power, obviously.
The flooding has damaged hundreds of homes and washed away part of a crucial roadway. Australia's Bureau of Meteorology says the area received 6 months of rainfall in just 3 days. An Ontario father says his 15-year-old son is buying drugs on a popular messaging app, and there's not much he can do to stop it. Snapchat is known for its fun camera features and filters. But this dad says dealers are relying on one another and another of the app's features to avoid detection. Ithel Musa is with Go Public. She has more.
He can't get through the day without using drugs.
Roger lives in fear his son will overdose. We're using a pseudonym to protect his son's identity. Roger says his 15-year-old is using the app Snapchat to buy drugs, and there's not much he can do to stop it.
I can't report it because there's no mechanism you can't click on something that doesn't exist to flag it for report.
That's because messages disappear on the app once they're viewed by the recipient. Roger says that feature makes it difficult to see what his son is doing and to report illegal activity.
I think that Snapchat's executives belong in prison.
Sam Chapman says his 16-year-old son Sammy overdosed on a fentanyl-laced pill he bought on the app. Now he and his wife in California are part of a U.S. lawsuit against Snapchat, brought by the relatives of more than 60 young people who overdosed on drugs allegedly purchased on the messaging platform.
Sammy died having it delivered to our front yard. He didn't have to leave our own home barely to get what killed him.
Snapchat says their parental control features allow parents to see who their children are talking to and to report any concerning accounts. The company also says it's working hard to stop drug dealers from abusing the platform. But unlike its messages, the problem is not going away. Ithel Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
The Yukon Quest is getting a reboot. The dog sled race is known as one of the toughest in the world. Mushers and their sled dogs hit the trail yesterday afternoon. And as Cheryl Kawaja reports, the iconic race looks much different this year.
I grew up running dogs, and it's in my family.
Rookie Johnny Cooey says this race is a dream come true. He used to watch the Yukon Quest on TV, growing up in the Gwich'in community of Fort McPherson. It was once a 1,600-kilometer sled dog race between the Yukon and Alaska. But trans-border disagreements over things like rules and dog care put an end to that. After a few years of Yukon-only races.
Well, we clearly had to make some big changes this year.
Ann Taylor is president of the race board.
Wanted to do what I could to make sure it survives and is reborn, really.
And that includes this new route, she says.
And the trail used to be so predictable. The weather was predictable, the ice conditions were predictable, snow was predictable.
The race is now in a different part of the territory. Some teams will do about 700 kilometers, up and back. Others, part of that distance, one way. A few mushers lament the loss of the longer, tougher race. But for Cooey, he's proud to be keeping the tradition alive.
It brings back a lot of memories for the elders also, and the elders, they smile when they see a dog team. It makes me feel special, that's for sure, yeah.
Cooey says he's happy to be out there on the trail right now with his team. Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Ross River, Yukon.
That is the latest from World Report. This month, we're asking you to follow World Report wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us reach new listeners and helps you stay on top of the day's top stories. I'm Marcia Young. This is CBC News.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us. We're live on Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. A cold morning in Manitoba. Right now, we're sitting at minus 20. We'll update that in a moment. We're also going to be dipping into your comments about what you're doing around the tariff situation, how you're thinking about it, what your hopes and fears are about it, and how you're impacted. Stephen Blight writing to us from Manitoba saying, I'm canceling my Amazon Prime membership. And Chris Lawson saying, I hope this is a catalyst to remove interprovincial trade barriers. So people thinking about this in all kinds of ways. We'll hear from the Premier this hour. Also this hour on the program, Winnipeg's largest school division decided to shift class schedules to get more kids in classrooms and combat absenteeism. We're going to check in with the Winnipeg School Division Superintendent. He'll be in studio this hour about the impact of that change 1 year since it was made. So stay tuned for that. Right now to Heather Wells for more on these stories and others. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, you're being encouraged to buy Canadian as Manitoba and other provinces pull American booze off liquor store shelves following Donald Trump's announced tariffs, which will kick in tomorrow. Manitoba farmers are also preparing for the impact. We'll hear from one who says it's not just going to be an economic hit, it's going to be a hit to mental health and anxiety. A United Church in Brandon is planning a day of pride after being targeted with threatening messages and vandalism. Brandon's Knox United Church says it faced pushback for supporting the city's 2 SLGBTQ plus community. We'll hear what kind of pushback they've been facing and what they plan to do about it coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Weather-wise, cold spot in the province right now is Tuduli Lake, minus 32, and that is also where there's an extreme cold warning. So with wind chills, it'll feel like minus 45 up in that part of Manitoba. In Winnipeg, still cold, not quite that cold. Our high minus 18, and with wind chill, it'll feel like minus 34. Right now, it is snowy out there. Snow grains being reported, which always makes it look a bit icy and foggy, and the current temperature is minus 20. And May McKillopson with our commute.
Good morning. No calls on the commuter line so far. No big closures to report that I've heard of so far. Just taking a quick look at our highway conditions northeast outside of Winnipeg. Some partly covered conditions, and I'm seeing some reduced visibility the further east you go across the province, through Treeherne, through Deloraine, a few different areas, quite a bit of reduced visibility and partly covered conditions on the highways. 511 if you're wanting to look at Manitoba highways. And give me a call with any commuter tips, 204-788-3093.
So let's hear from Manitoba's Premier Wab Kinew on the tariff situation. Obviously, the big headline here is Donald Trump with the 25% tariffs. It kicks in tomorrow. Premier Wab Kinew announcing Sunday, as Heather mentioned, Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries Corporation will stop selling products imported from the United States. That starts February 4th as well, so that's kicking in tomorrow. Liquor marts are going to pull all those products off the shelves from the U.S. They will stop ordering American goods as well. So how will this affect the American economy? Premier Wab Kinew says he believes it will take a chunk out of the U.S. sales.
I'm here to speak to the people of Manitoba about a very unique threat to our economy, and that is the threat posed by the Trump tariffs, the Trump tariff tax. So by now, most Manitobans are starting to appreciate how serious of a situation that this is, and I'm here to provide reassurance that your provincial government, along with the feds and all of our partners, are going to be working around the clock to protect your jobs and to safeguard our economy. At this time, unity is extremely important. When we face a threat like this, we all have to stand together as Canadians and stand together as Manitobans. Folks who've been paying close attention to the provincial scene will know that since the election, we've been talking about one Manitoba. And the reason why we've been doing that is because we know that we are all one people who live in this province and we share a common destiny. But now that we are presented with this threat from beyond our borders in the form of a Trump tariff tax, the idea of one Manitoba takes on renewed importance. As we head into this period of tariffs, some of our fellow Manitobans are going to feel the impacts right away. For other Manitobans and in other industries, it may take some time, but we all need to stand together, shoulder to shoulder, to be there for one another. And I also want to acknowledge that this is going to mean a change for many people in the province, things that we've taken for granted, things that are actually a part of our culture, I would say, like cross-border shopping, are going to be changed by this new reality that we are facing and that has been brought in by President Trump. And so this week, your provincial government, we are going to be announcing every day new steps that we're taking to support our economy and to protect your jobs. And today I'm announcing the first of those steps. Today I'm telling the people of Manitoba that beginning on Tuesday, February 4th, the day that tariffs take effect, we are going to be pulling U.S. products off of Liquor Mart shelves. This applies to Liquor Marts, Liquor Mart Express, and of course to the wholesale operation that MBLL runs in this province. And what does this mean? This means that we are going to be taking $80 million out of the U.S. economy. This is $80 million that we won't be spending in the United States of America. We have to stand up for jobs in our province. We have to stand up for manufacturers and the ag industry and the energy industry and everyone else who's going to be threatened by these tariffs. And it's very, very important that we stand up for ourselves, not just as Manitobans, but also as Canadians. The situation that we're confronted with, yes, this is a trade dispute. This is an economic threat. But we should also be very, very clear-eyed about the threat that this poses to our sovereignty as an independent country. We have stepped up when it comes to border security. We already had a secure border, and we've deployed more resources to it. Since our election, we have brought the hammer down on drug traffickers in our province. And so when it comes to taking action on fentanyl or on the border, we're happy to do that because it aligns with our values as Manitobans. But if we bow down at this current moment, then what is the next edict that we will be told to respond to as Manitobans and Canadians? And so what I've been saying in the lead up to this moment is we are trying to work closely with our American allies and to make the case about the strength of that relationship. But now that this fight is here, a fight that we did not ask for, we have to stick up for ourselves. And so the first step that we're announcing, it has to do with pulling U.S. products off the shelves, and it means that we won't be carrying these products thereafter. We've been in conversation with some of the private retailers, and we're not going to be providing them any directive what to do, but of course we expect that Manitobans as consumers are going to be wanting to spend their dollars on Canadian products, Canadian liquor, Canadian wines, as well as maybe on products that come from parts of the world that are going to treat us fairly and that are going to be good business partners for us.
Premier Wab Kinew announcing yesterday Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries Corporation will stop selling products imported from the United States. And of course, critical in that statement is that he said his government will be announcing something each and every day as we go along in this critical week. Tomorrow is the day where the tariffs will begin to take effect. We're asking for your calls. If you call us now or within the next half hour, we can get these calls into our programming this morning. We have the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce on after 8. So the number to call is 788-3205. That is our listener line, 788-3205. Over the weekend, lots of you writing on Facebook about the tariffs and counter tariffs. This morning, I'm wondering what worries you in Manitoba about the trade war and why, and how might you be affected. So what questions do you have about that? How's it affecting you already? 788-3205. It's 7:19 right now in the city of Winnipeg. It's minus 20 over in Brandon, minus 23. Thompson is minus 24 degrees. Well, next on the show to something completely different. When people think of our country's history with Black people, they think of freedom. The Underground Railroad, maybe, or Viola Desmond on our $10 bill. But we have, of course, dark truths that we need to face as well. That's why Shanice Steele posts every year on Black History Month, facts for the month. It's something they've been doing since 2021.
This is a reminder that queer history is Black history. Founded in 1984 by Afro-Caribbean gay and lesbian activists, Zami, named after the Audre Lorde book and the Creole word for lesbian, became one of the most important support groups and advocacy organizations for Black queer Caribbean voices in the city of Toronto. While they no longer exist as an organization today, their legacy of fighting for Black queer voices do. The more you know.
Now, they want to bust myths about Black history in Canada, as I mentioned, and they join us now on Zoom from Barrie, Ontario. Good morning to you.
Hello, good morning.
It's pretty cool that you do this. Tell me a bit about the motivation behind it, though. It's also got to be frustrating that you feel you need to do this, right, in this country?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the motivation behind it is I really started to hear from Canadians that we don't have the same history as the United States, that we don't have a history of slavery and discrimination. And as I got older and I started researching Black history, I found out that wasn't true. And so it was not only frustrating for me to hear people say that, but it was frustrating for myself because I hadn't learned this history in school either.
Can you bust? I know you can take your pick because there's lots. But what are some of the myths that you'd like to bust that you find maybe come up the most?
I I think the biggest one is that we never had slavery in Canada. That was something that I was super surprised about finding out. It was a myth that I busted for myself. I remember my dad took me to Fort Erie in Ontario, and I got my first book about Harriet Tubman, and I was so proud of Canada being this safe place for Black people. And then I went to university, I started reading more, and I learned about slavery in Canada. It's also interesting to know that 50% of enslaved people here were also Indigenous. And so there's that history of solidarity and resilience that we don't hear about a lot. But for me, it was really learning that there was slavery in Canada. There was even a reverse underground railroad where people were trying to escape to the northern United States. And when we think of the Montreal that we see today, it was actually supposedly burnt down by an enslaved woman who was escaping for her freedom, Marie-Joseph Angelique. So those are all things that I think really Canadians need to know about that history.
As you've been doing this over these years, what kinds of conversations does your myth busting, when you do these facts and put them out there, what kinds of conversations come from it?
Honestly, I think most part it's been really positive. Folks are very surprised. They talk about how they didn't learn this, they didn't know that. I think for a lot of Black Canadians or people of African descent, it allows them to know the history on this land, to know their relationship with the government, with people, what they've contributed to what we now see as Canada. And I think for non-Black people, non-people of African descent, it's a real reckoning. It's an eye-opening opportunity. It was a reckoning for me, and I think it gives us an opportunity to know our history so that we can do better. And I think it's been really receptive. There's been some folks being like, "Ooh, I don't know how I feel about that." And I think, right, it's that feeling of guilt of not knowing. And so it's about like working through that. But so far, the conversations have been really great.
When you engage with people online, do you have a sense of where they're coming from? Like whether or not generationally you're reaching older generations who are saying, I had no idea, or generations your age that are saying, I also had no idea, I wasn't taught this. What's your sense of who's leaning into these discussions?
Honestly, I would say it's people of any age. I've had teachers reach out, my videos. So I made videos in 2021 and got fake mustaches and costumes and really dressed up for them. And so teachers have really used those videos in their classrooms, and I've done class talks for that. I've definitely spoken with older people, even within my family, who did not know this history. So it's really been a wide array of Canadians that are engaging in this conversation and in this topic, from people my age to the older generation to youth as well.
What else do you plan to do with your platform for the rest of Black History Month?
So I'll be sharing every single day either a post or a reel about Black Canadian history that folks may not know about. For me, it's really about finding ways to engage with Canadians, to share this history, because I think it's super important. And so, yeah, I'll be doing it the rest of Black History Month. Every single day, there will be a new fact to learn. And I'm super excited because I'm getting excited in the research that I'm doing. I'm learning about Black Canadian history that I didn't know and getting like really nerded out about it. I love it. And so, yeah, it's going to be a learning journey for myself and anyone who's following me for the rest of the month.
Who are some of the Black content creators that you're learning from?
So there's actually quite a few, and there's some books that I want to recommend as well. So historicallyspeaking.ca is a Instagram account that I highly recommend following because they post Black Canadian history, not just during Black History Month, but throughout the year. Charismagi TV, also on Instagram, who's been posting a lot of great Black Canadian content, but also will be posting during Black History Month as well, and has already made a really amazing post about the history of Black History Month in Canada. How did it come about? For Francophone listeners, I highly recommend Camille Esther, Camille_Esther, also on Instagram, who will be posting in French throughout the month, Black Canadian history. And then some books that I highly recommend to kind of give you an understanding of history in this country is The Hanging of Angelique by Afua Cooper, who talks about Marie-Joseph Angelique and her story. Unsettling the Great White North by Michelle A. Johnson, and Funke Aladejebi, who was a professor at Trent University that I learned under and is an amazing Black Canadian historian. I highly recommend following those three people, reading those books so that you can learn more about Black Canadian history.
Thank you very much for being with us this morning, Shanice. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. That's Shanice Steele. She's an Afro-Indigenous educator, lives in Barrie, Ontario. If you want to follow their page, Learn with Shanice, it's on Instagram. And as mentioned, they'll be posting something new each and every day specifically for Black History Month. They've done that for the last number of years. If you're an educator and you've got this covered in your classroom, we'd love to visit you and learn with you in Manitoba. You can pitch us at radio893@cbc.ca. Well, it is time to, I wish we were starting with baseball because I just said you can pitch us, but we're actually starting with basketball. Scott Reguera is with us for Morning Sports. Hi, how you doing?
Well, you can pitch a basketball. It's tricky.
Is it a good shot, though? Probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
Raptors fans let their feelings be known even before things tipped off against LA.
Yeah, with the game against the Clippers coming only hours, Marcy, after Donald Trump made his threat of import tariffs a reality. Here's how the American anthem was greeted. Spectators initially cheered for the 15-year-old singer, Kyra Daniel, but then things, as you can hear, quickly devolved. By contrast, Marcy, fans erupted when O Canada was presented. Asked about it after the game, Raptors forward Chris Boucher, who is from Montreal, said he'd never seen anything like it, but then he added, quote unquote, "Have you ever seen us get taxed like this before?" Jeers were also heard yesterday during the performance of the Star-Spangled Banner at hockey games involving the Canucks and the Senators. U.S. national anthem jeering in Canada. It's rare, but not unheard of, especially when tied to world events. Remember, in the early 2000s, fans at games in Canada booed to show their disapproval of the U.S.-led war in Iraq.
I want to read you a comment before we go to our next story because it's on this. I think you'll appreciate this in the context. Diane Poulin wrote in, I asked about the tariffs, counter tariffs. She said, this is a local Manitoban, "This is like finding out your spouse is cheating on you. Even if the relationship's repaired, the state of innocence is gone." I just thought that was kind of a...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
All right, let's get back to the Raptors. Their actual play on the court has really been picking up lately.
Yeah, they ended up beating Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers yesterday relatively comfortably in the end. So that's 8 wins in 10 tries for Toronto, which started the season, remember, losing nearly every time out. Here's Coach Darko Rajakovic.
Anytime in life when you go through some failures, call it failures, they are only failures if you don't learn anything from them. If you learn from them, if you study the film, if you study your game, if you put the work in, you turn that into your success. So that's what the team does. That's what our guys take pride of, and we're really trying to improve day by day.
Darko Rajakovic of one of the hottest teams in the league right now, the Raptors, who we don't know whether they're going to be sellers as expected or maybe buyers now ahead of Thursday's NBA trade deadline.
Now, speaking of the deadline, one of the biggest deals in league history was finalized yesterday.
Man, still not quite over the shock of that deal that will send Mavericks megastar Luka Doncic to the Lakers for the almost as glittery Anthony Davis. Seldom, if ever, Marcy, have we seen players of this profile dealt for one another, and it's clear many fans in Dallas, they're not happy about it.
Why are we trading the best player, the franchise player? How are we trading the franchise player? You went to the NBA Finals. He's supposed to have a statue.
Why would you trade Luka? And if you are to trade Luka, why would you not get the best trade package available? At least make it make sense.
And this place, American Airlines, the Mavericks, this was my safe place. And now I have nothing. Basically, they screw up the best sport thing in Dallas.
Mr. Luka, you were supposed to stay here for forever. My kids were supposed to watch you.
Yeah, Doncic was set to receive a Supermax contract worth, believe this or not, $350 million this summer. That's American. I can't even fathom what that would convert into Canadian to this morning.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
That's Scott Reguera with Morning Sports. Still ahead, we actually have a sports story. We're going to meet 2 Winnipeg women who helped Canada's national para-hockey team score their way to the World Championships. That's after your CBC News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. February begins feeling frigid in Winnipeg. A high today of minus 18. Right now at 7:30, it's minus 20. So we won't be warming up very much throughout the day. U.S. President Donald Trump has telephone calls scheduled today with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and with Mexico President Claudia Sheinbaum. But it's clear neither leader should expect Trump to change his mind on implementing tariffs.
I'm speaking with Prime Minister Trudeau tomorrow morning, and I'm also speaking with Mexico tomorrow morning. And I don't expect anything very dramatic. We put tariffs on. They owe us a lot of money, and I'm sure they're going to pay.
Which means the Trudeau government will be responding with its own tariff actions. Premier Wab Kinew says Trump's tariffs are not just an attack on Canada's economy. He says they're an attack on Canadian sovereignty. Manitoba's premier has announced this province will remove U.S. booze from liquor store shelves tomorrow as part of this province's response.
As long as I'm the premier, we are going to continue standing for the maple leaf, and we're going to continue shouting True North every time we sing the anthem. And if you have to switch to Crown Royal as part of us upholding that patriotism, I think that's a pretty good deal.
Kinew encourages Manitobans to buy Canadian whenever possible, and he promises to announce more measures to combat the tariffs through the week. Some anger on the streets of Winnipeg to Trump's tariffs. Speaking outside a liquor mart in Osborne Village, Peter Mason suggested a stronger response.
Canada, in my opinion, should just cut off the gas, cut off the water, cut off the electricity, because we supply almost all their northern states. And I think if we did a smart move like this, it might wake Trump up a little bit.
Another shopper, Herb Neufeld, doesn't think removing American booze will accomplish much, calling it mostly symbolic. Manitoba exported more than $15 billion worth of goods to the United States in 2023. This province's farmers are bracing for the impact of those U.S. tariffs. Cara Burrell and her husband own a grain and vegetable farm. She's not sure what to expect as Canadian counter tariffs are set to begin tomorrow as well. Burrell says it's not just the financial impact.
A lot of our livelihood comes from the farm, and when the profits are squeezed, often from both sides, it definitely can impact farming families' mental health, for sure, and cause anxiety.
Burrell is now looking at new ways to diversify her income so she's not relying just on what her farm produces. Meanwhile, in Ontario this morning, Premier Doug Ford is moving to ban American companies from provincial contracts. As well, Ford says his province is ripping up its contract with Starlink. He says Ontario won't do business with people hell-bent on destroying our economy. Starlink, of course, the satellite service operated by SpaceX. So we'll hear the latest on that coming up on World Report at 8. Celebrating after the ceasefire. Video of children in Gaza dancing. Hala Kafa, a Palestinian refugee in Winnipeg, received the video on WhatsApp from a friend in Gaza. They have also shared bleaker videos of broken down homes, rubble, and human remains. She says her loved ones hope to go back to Rafah despite what's happened in the last 15 months.
When they say that they have no food, when they have no water, when they have no medicine, when they have no hospitals, when they have no shelter, when it was raining and the mattresses and all the clothes that they had were literally floating, what do you respond to that?
Kafa says she is broken and lives with survivor's guilt. A United Church in Brandon is planning a day of pride after being targeted with threatening messages and vandalism. Brandon's Knox United Church says it faced pushback for supporting the city's 2S LGBTQ+ community. Since last summer, there have been menacing phone calls, hateful social media messages, and vandalism on the church walls. Minister Craig Miller says the congregation is more committed than ever to standing up for their beliefs.
We don't want those that are opposed to human rights for all sexual orientations and gender identities. We don't want to let them always set the agenda.
The church has now adjusted some of its safety protocols. Well, this year's Grammy Awards were handed out last night in Los Angeles, with Album of the Year going to Beyoncé for Cowboy Carter.
This ain't Texas, ain't no hold 'em, so lay your cards down, 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 down.
The most celebrated artist in Grammy history had been nominated for Best Album 4 times over the course of her career, but until last night, she'd never won it. Kendrick Lamar won both Song and Record of the Year for Not Like Us, and this year's Best New Artist is Chappell Roan. All the winners and all the Grammy highlights are on our website this morning, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
There's a tornado.
You can find more news there and throughout the day as well. We'll have the latest coming up on World Report at 8.
It was a great album. I have to say, though, she also won Best Country Album, and you and I were remarking on the faces of the nominees, like Casey Musgraves specifically, like you could kind of see their reaction to that on
a little surprised.
There were a lot of really solid country albums. This year was a tough category. So.
It really was. And especially when you see someone cross genres and become the new one. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? She took home those awards and more last night. Speaking of Chappell Roan, I thought a great performance from her last night. And I actually really enjoyed the Grammys. I watched most of them this year.
So creative. All of the performances were really good.
Agreed. Like big, huge stage shows.
I can't imagine how much time they put into that.
I know. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And some really solid tributes as well. Moving tributes to what happened with the fires in LA, as you can imagine. And Feather, my fave. I just love that tune. 7:36 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. Okay, let's get into this weather here. It's freezing outside. Let's not mince words. Today in Winnipeg, a high of minus 18. It's going to feel like minus 34 with wind chill. Bundle up. Mix of sun and cloud. Cold tonight, low minus 27. Tomorrow, sunny, minus 18. Crisp and cold for the next couple of days, and then we get some snow Wednesday. Right now in Winnipeg, it's cloudy, and the current temperature is minus 20. Over in Brandon, similar conditions. Light snow and drifting snow right now. It's minus 24. Flurries continue this morning. Minus 20 is the high. It's going to feel like minus 39 with wind chill in Brandon. Clear tonight, cold overnight, and a low of minus 29 in Brandon tonight. Tomorrow, sun and cloud, high minus 18. And then, snow on Wednesday. So Winnipeg, Brandon, much the same. Let's go north, though. In Thompson, you are expecting today in the forecast a bit of a different day. Drifting snow right now and minus 24 degrees. And in your forecast, sun and cloud, chance of light snow this morning, your high minus 22. And tonight, partly cloudy, low minus 28. Tomorrow, mainly sunny in Thompson, your high minus 20. And on Wednesday, you are not expecting snow, but a mix of sun and cloud. To the commute now with May McKillop.
Hey there. No big reports today. I haven't gotten any calls on the commuter line, so I'm assuming that means that the commute is moving along smoothly. If that's not your case, though, if you're sitting in traffic and you're seeing, traffic lights not working or a stalled car, give me a call. I would love to hear about it. Just looking at some highway conditions outside of the city. If you're heading northeast out towards Lac du Bonnet area, we're seeing some partly covered, snow-covered conditions along the highways. As well, heading east across the province out of Winnipeg, that's where I'm seeing most of the issues. We're seeing some reduced visibility like through Treeherne area and south across the province, south of Highway number 1. That's all I'm seeing so far. But if you're out there and you're wanting to pass along a message about the commute, give me a call and I will pass that along. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, May. Well, time right now is 22 minutes to 8 o'clock, and up next on Information Radio, the latest in our special series of stories produced by filmmaking students in the CREATE program at Sisler High School. This is in collaboration with CBC Manitoba. So this week we're going to meet two Manitoba women, Peyton Vergy and Alyssa White. They're both sledge hockey players. They both helped Canada's women's national para-hockey team score their way to the World Championships. And their bond off of the ice as well is as inspiring as it is on the ice. CREATE students Gianluca Calderola, as well as Marcus Penner and Joshua Soriano, produced the story. And the first voice you're going to hear in the story is Peyton Vergy's.
It means everything to me. It's my life. It's my passion. I don't know where I would be without it, and it's who I am. It's the biggest part of me.
My mom came home and she was like, "This is like the first time I've seen you smile in so long." I was 15, but I ended up breaking a bone in my foot or ankle that unfortunately it wasn't able to be seen on x-rays, so they didn't quite know what was going on until like 5 years later when we did an MRI and they saw that there was a break in it and it did not heal properly and they didn't know how to fix it. I was very active in like any sport that I could do. Essentially in a span of 3 months the pain got so bad I just had to like stop doing everything. Like the pain got so bad that I was unable to go to school, so I had to become like homeschooled. So I approached my doctor about like if amputation was a choice, because it'd been like 7 or 8 years at that point, and I knew that the pain, it would not get any better. Like it would just continue to get worse and worse and worse. So I asked if this was like an option we can do. She said it was an option, but she had like a little checklist for me of things she wanted me to do. She wanted me to get involved in a parasport, so it was either wheelchair basketball or sledge hockey. And I used to be a hockey player, so the choice was pretty easy.
Para hockey is an adaptive sport that gives an amazing opportunity for individuals with all sorts of disabilities a place to play and have fun and feel supported and welcome. They use a bucket and 2 sticks. At the end of the sticks is usually 4 prongs that are used to propel themselves, that are also used to shoot and stick handle.
It changed quite drastically after the amputation. I remember like waking up from surgery and I cried because the pain was gone. Like I didn't feel any pain. I was just able to like be there the whole time, and now I'm able to walk again, gonna be able to run again soon. It's been everything. I can go out, I can have friends, I can do stuff.
I was born with spina bifida. I had never played any sort of hockey ever, and I had never been on the ice in general. I came from swimming originally, so I had the upper body strength, which set me up for success in this sport.
One week, again, Alyssa, my teammate, she came up to me and she was like, hey, do you have any interest in like going farther? Like I could mention your name to the national team coaches. And that was when I was like, oh, like I could do something.
I like to think that I had a little part in that for Peyton, and I mean, she can do the exact same thing for somebody else one day, and yeah, it's super exciting.
I'm so proud of them. Their determination and their work ethic is amazing. They are amazing athletes who work hard every single day, every single practice, giving their 100% effort, and it's so amazing to watch them grow and succeed in the sport itself. Going to Norway itself is a huge accomplishment, and I'm so proud of them for representing Canada the way that they do.
Going to Norway, that was very exciting. Norway itself is like a bucket list location for me, so I was really excited to be there. I've never played on like a hockey team of all girls in my whole life, even when I was doing stand-up. So just being able to be on the ice with just like a whole bunch of women was just amazing.
These athletes are so strong, and the barriers they have faced in their life and they have overcome, and seeing that is so amazing, and I'm so glad that I get to be a part of that and help the sport grow and help these athletes have a place to play and advocate for them.
Those are the voices of Team Manitoba sledge hockey head coach McKenna Wild and sledge hockey para-athletes Peyton Virgie and Alyssa White. Create students Giancola Calderola as well as Marcus Calderola and Marcus Penner as well as Joshua Soriano produced that story with support from CBC Manitoba. If you want to see more, you can go to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba. It's also going to be on CBC News at 6 tonight.
Here's to the bowl. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops, Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it.
More now in a story you may have heard in our news this morning with Heather Wells at 7:30, and a caution that some may find some details in our next story distressing. After 15 months, there is hope in Gaza. Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire. The fighting has stopped, and Israel and Hamas have exchanged hostages for prisoners. Hala Kofa lives in Winnipeg, but has family and friends in Gaza, and she's a Palestinian refugee who also lived in exile in Qatar since the age of 2. Hala and her sons immigrated to Canada in 2023, just 2 months before the October 7th attack. She spoke with the CBC's Zabina Ahmed.
All my cousins in Gaza have been literally begging me to help them. They've been begging for salvation because the situation was unbearable. Like literally my cousins were telling me, Hala, like every day we stay alive by mere chance. My cousins have moved to Rafah. Some of them in Rafah had all their houses demolished, and some of them had bits and pieces of their houses left. So they are all supporting each other and staying like with whatever is remaining. and some of them have put up a tent where their house was. They are all very happy by the mere fact that there was a ceasefire implemented, because that was the urgent and most immediate need. But they have their hopes, they have their wishes, they are dreaming of this. Had made people like see Palestine, realize what's been happening to them, and to do something for them, and not to leave them alone. So they do have a lot of hopes for the future.
Alakofa speaking with the CBC's Zabina Ahmed. It is 7:46 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. If you want to read more, by the way, about that interview and story, you can go online to our website. In Winnipeg, snow grains minus 20, and time for a little bit of music this morning.
I love a high expectation. Meet me at the field. No, I'd love to see you. Your friends are my friends. Your clothes are my clothes now. I love a long anticipation. You pay a lot of money for therapy just to listen to me and repeat next week. It's got to get old, but I bite my nails and I always will. My little bad habit that I love to feel. I always wanna pull in to you, but I can't fall on my knees again. Gravel in my palms and now my jeans are tearing, and I can't follow your lead again. You cut me down, but I keep on crawling. We need some real conversations. You touch me just to cut it short, and I think that's on purpose. I think that you know it. So my greyhound, green grass, last chance, best case. It's so hard when you feel so good. I bite my nails and I always will. My little bad habit that I love to feel. I always wanna pull in to you, but I can't fall on my knees again. Gravel in my palms and now my jeans are tearing, and I can't follow your lead again. You cut me down, but I keep on crawling.
Katie Tupper out of Saskatchewan. If you want to check out her music, this tune is called Jeans. Well, you need more than that this morning. Maybe jeans layered over some fleece and a big coat and a hat and a scarf. It's cold. It's going to be really cold all week. Snow grains in Winnipeg right now, minus 20. Brandon and Thompson are sitting at minus 24. Well, just before our next interview, I want to dip into the top story about tariffs and Manitobans reacting, certainly Canadians reacting to the 25% tariffs and then the counter tariffs on goods. Every day, a new measure is going to be announced in this province. Premier Wab Kinew, we heard from earlier this hour, saying that obviously we're starting with, as you may have heard in the news, liquor, American liquor, going to be pulled off the shelves in our liquor stores, but every day something different. We asked you how you're thinking about this, how you're going to be impacted by it, and Marilyn Hildebrand Campbell wrote in writing, Trump, likes to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. We run around like headless chickens. Unfortunately, he doesn't need to back down because he's king. I work in Steinbach at a window manufacturing plant, and we sell into the U.S. and getting pretty much upset at this dumpster fire, as Marilyn describes it. Other people reacting in a more, a lot of you feeling unsteady. I would use the language by reading all of your comments. Manitoba Taylor writing in, I knew they were likely to coming, the tariffs that is, but after it was announced, I felt desperately sad and angry, and I'm hurt. I'm hurt by some Americans I know and love not reaching out to us as Canada was being trolled and bullied. It feels like we lost a friend that we loved, and in fact we did. It's so sad. The America we knew is honestly gone. That coming from listeners writing in this morning. So the Chamber's coming on to talk about the practical implications of this after 8 o'clock as we continue to follow the developing news. Next, though, let's move to school news and educational changes. Last February, the Winnipeg School Division decided to give some students more time off, in effect, in order to get more of them in the classroom. So at some high schools, they started their classes an hour later or ended them an hour earlier one day a week. This was done to give teachers time to address the issue of absenteeism. According to their latest their data at the time, 2,500 students within the Winnipeg School Division, most of whom are in high school, are struggling to get to school. So we're a year on. We want to find out how the plans are working. Matt Henderson is in studio with us, superintendent at the Winnipeg School Division. Good morning.
Good morning.
So do you have any data to support how you've done a year on, or where are you at with this?
Yeah, first, what I would say is that absenteeism is still a huge issue for Winnipeg School Division. It's something that keeps us all up. And I think as a community, as Winnipeg, it's something that is a multi-tiered, multi-dimensional problem. But it is, we have an issue, and that's why we have all hands on deck. I would say around, the late start, early dismissal, that was one lever in a really complex issue, which is kids not coming to school on a regular basis. We have seen some really powerful school moves, particularly at DMCI, at Kelvin, at TechVoc, where they've really dug in, adjusted their plans, but really dug in to ensure that those kids who are missing lots of school, they're connecting with them, they're connecting with family, they're providing supports, they're working with community partners to bring those kids in.
So I was going to ask you about that because part of this, the time for teachers was to give them time to come up with solutions to get kids in class and build on the pilot. You brought up already some specific school examples. So how has that worked? If they connect with a community partner, for example, can you give us a concrete way that you've seen that result in getting kids back in class?
Sure. So for Daniel Mack, for instance, where you might not think, hey, there's probably not an absentee problem. There's an absentee problem in every single school. Absenteeism is a North American phenomenon since COVID, since the opioid crisis, and every single school, regardless of neighborhood, is having some issues. And so I don't want to pin it on any particular family or any particular school or anything like that. But Daniel Mack, for instance, has done a fantastic job of connecting with Huddle and various services, identifying students. They have their first ever drum group where elders have come in to really support some of that work. They played at our divisional day. It was amazing. Similarly, TechVoc has done, really looked at who is off track. We don't say at risk. It's we've shifted language to say whether a student is on track to graduate or off track to graduate, because that puts the responsibility back on us as the adults to say we have to get them on track. And that's that, shifting the language, shifting the culture. But I would say it's not late start, early dismissal is not going to fix all the woes of absenteeism. What we have found is you have to have clear communication with families. Lots of families since COVID, and there's lots of research on this throughout North America, have gotten the message that school is not important. And we're trying to build that up. If you look at our data, there's a huge dip right where COVID began, and of course the opioid crisis sort of doubled down, and so now we're trying to rebuild. Part of that is you can't just sort of say a late start or an early dismissal is going to help that. You have to build community partnerships. You have to have a sense of shared responsibility for every staff person in a building to say it's important for every single kid to come.
So I know that was your purpose for putting this in place in the pilot and working towards solutions. You mentioned that some of the partnerships, one of the specific ones was done with Huddle, you said?
Yes.
What is Huddle?
Huddle is, there are 4 locations throughout the city. They're supported by United Way. They're sort of community health outlets for kids to go. But we have community partnerships with Bear Clan. Since being with Bear Clan at RB Russell, Children of the Earth, Elmwood's attendance has improved incredibly. Its enrollment has improved incredibly.
What's incredibly mean? Is it quantifiable?
From 20% of kids missing to now we're at about 10%.
And so that was in the last year since some of these things were being tried?
That's in the last year.
Do you know what the overall number is? If the last year's data said 2,500 students in the division struggled to get to class, what's that number today?
We're at about the same.
Okay.
It's really hard to differentiate between what is respiratory virus illness. This is a huge issue right now. You had Dr. Rusin on a few weeks ago, and that was the first time that I've heard his voice in a long time. But we are really struggling with kids just being sick. But where we see success at Elmwood, at Yukon, McDonald has done fantastic work because they've got a nutrition program, a brand new kitchen. They've got a chef there.
How's that? Is that affecting absenteeism?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do their numbers look like if Elmwoods have gone from 20% to 10% absenteeism in a year?
I don't have those in front of me, but certainly Yukon, their attendance has gone up. But that's also because they've brought in we brought in new leadership there. The teachers are fired up. There's a sense of responsibility. Peaceful Village is there after school every day, extending the day for kids. So you have to, because this is such a multi-dimensional problem, you can't just attack it from one area. So, for example, lots of our students who have struggles coming to school, it's because of homelessness. Others, it's because of addictions at home. Others, because there have been people up all night in their homes and they're struggling to get to
Have you learned more
school.
about those reasons in the last year, given that you've undertaken this pilot?
Absolutely. I mean, we connect with parents all the time. Our schools are connected with parents. We're doing home visits. The incredible staff at Shaughnessy Park are going out every single day to connect, which is really, really difficult work. But we also have district advisory. I'm at PACS talking to parents, just sort of saying, tell me about what the difficulties
Parent advisory councils. Just last, before we turn to headlines briefly here, what's next? Do you continue this project in terms of starting later, leaving earlier, like to continue to try to improve absenteeism?
It really depends. I mean, we've had a couple schools who have shifted away from it and said, we're going to double down on advisory, on homeroom, where we really feel that that's going to be helpful for our kids to have a strong start in the morning.
Who shifted?
Gordon Bell.
Okay.
Gordon Bell, Children of the Earth, which are part of the Big Picture Learning Network, the Met School networks.
Okay.
They have shifted to sort of say, no, we want to shift strategies and bring kids together, have strong advisory, strong starts where kids are known by multiple adults who say, I love you, I know that you're going to be successful, and they've seen real positive results.
Okay, so there's some strategy shifting here. Matt, thank you for giving us the 1 year later view. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
That is Matt Henderson, the superintendent of the Winnipeg School Division, with us for an update on something they started to combat absenteeism, a new strategy you put in a year ago. Heather Wells is here with those headlines.
Good morning. Yes, as that trade war with the U.S. looms, Manitoba's premier says Donald Trump's tariffs are not just an attack on Canada's economy.
This is also a question of national identity and national sovereignty, and we have to send a message that we are not going to bow down.
After announcing all U.S. liquor will be pulled from Manitoba Liquor Mart shelves tomorrow, Canoe says the province plans other tariff responses through the week. Farmers also preparing for the impact. Cara Burrell and her husband own a grain and vegetable farm, and she says it's not just the economic hit, but the hit to mental health. Manitoba exported more than $15 billion worth of goods to the U.S. in 2023. We'll hear more reaction coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Chamber of Commerce for Manitoba, the head is going to be on with us after 8 to continue talking about this. It's -20 in Winnipeg. The commute so far so good, but call us if we're missing a problem, 788-3093. Also coming up on the program after 8 o'clock, a North End City Councillor talks about how he'd like to see a section of Main Street transform from vacant to vibrant. They've been facing fires and all kinds of issues on that stretch. Stay tuned.
Today on Q with Tom Power. Back in the 90s, the band Bush took over the radio, Much Music, MTV. They were inescapable. Bush's frontman Gavin Rossdale will look back on the time that made him a star, and he'll tell you about playing his biggest hits on a huge Canadian tour in 2025. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
As you've heard, Donald Trump is putting 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, a move with massive impacts that will be felt across this country. We will hear from the federal finance minister, the mayor of Windsor, Ontario, and those watching both the trade and the politics coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Donald Trump are talking tariffs today. The two leaders will be speaking over the phone for the first time since Trump initiated the new levy on Canadian imports. The 25% tariff is supposed to be in place on Tuesday, and Canada's response is expected to top the agenda on the call. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, what are we expecting during this much anticipated phone call?
Yeah, I suspect it'll be a pivotal high-stakes call ahead of what is shaping up to be an ugly trade war. Now, Canadian officials say they hope to find a constructive path forward and convince the White House they are taking aggressive steps to secure the northern border, crack down on fentanyl, and rebalance trade. But President Donald Trump says he doesn't expect anything, quote, dramatic. He's accusing Canada of essentially freeloading off the U.S., from criticizing low military spending to unfair trade practices that block U.S. companies from expanding in Canada, while the U.S. lets Canada expand stateside. Take a listen.
Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years. They don't allow our banks. Did you know that? Canada does not allow banks to go in. If you think about it, that's pretty amazing. If we have a U.S. bank, they don't allow them to go in. Canada's been very tough on oil, on energy. They don't allow our farm products in, essentially. They don't allow a lot of things in, and we allow everything to come in. It's been a one-way street.
Now, I'm told the call is supposed to take place before 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Trump's tariffs, 25% tariffs, are supposed to take effect at midnight, and Trump himself admits Americans could feel some pain after they take effect.
Richard, do we expect today's phone call to change anything?
Yeah, a top Canadian official told me this morning they're not optimistic this call will change much, at least in the short term. So this may be what Trump would call the art of the deal. He claims both Canada and Mexico owe the U.S. a lot of money, and they're going to pay. So the question now is for how long?
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Canada's premiers are conducting a media blitz. They are making the case it's not too late for Trump to back down on tariffs. Ontario Premier Doug Ford appeared on Fox News this past hour.
Inflation is going to happen in the U.S. It's going to happen in Canada. Interest rates will go up. It's like buying a pickup truck manufactured here is going to cost Americans 25% more, and vice versa. We're your allies. We're your friends. We need to build a strong two nations, not fight each other.
Doug Ford says he will be ripping up his government's contract with Elon Musk's company Starlink. He also says starting today, Ontario will not allow U.S. companies to bid on provincial contracts. That locks them out of tens of billions of dollars of new business. Ford says the rule will not be lifted until U.S. tariffs are lifted. The first shots in this trade war are starting to land. There is reaction coming in from Ottawa's proposed counter tariffs, and Janice McGregor is in our parliamentary bureau. Janice, what is the latest response?
Marcia, officials briefing reporters on Canada's initial $30 billion list of targeted U.S. products said they don't actually have any early estimates to share for its projected economic impact. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc was meeting with the Bank of Canada and Canada's major financial institutions yesterday, trying to get a read on how their forecasts are going to shift now, what that means for the fight on inflation. But this early list was designed to get political attention, targeting American brands in states with vocal senators and representatives. Economist Trevor Tombe, for example, he ran some early math, and he found that exports from the vice president's home state of Ohio were hit the hardest, for example. Officials also couldn't estimate how much revenue is going to come in from these counter tariffs. They don't know, for example, how many requests they're going to get from Canadian businesses that argue they should be exempt from paying them. They don't know how consumers will change their behavior and stop buying these goods. But not knowing how many billions are going to come in from these tariffs also suggests that the government's flying blind on how much it can afford to spend on helping Canadian workers and businesses about to be harmed. Yesterday, Pierre Poilievre suggested Conservatives are going to keep a close eye on that.
The tariffs must not be a tax grab. None of the money from the tariffs should stay in government coffers or be spent on unrelated government priorities.
And this morning, Janice, Pierre Poilievre has released his own proposal to improve Canada's competitiveness. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this latest video he's posted lays out how a Conservative government would tackle the persistent problem of interprovincial trade barriers getting in the way of Canadians doing business with other Canadians. Moves like standardizing trucking regulations from coast to coast, or what Polyev called a blue seal professional licensing standard to make it easier to take a job in another province. A Conservative government, he said, would also reward provinces that remove barriers to boost economic growth with an equivalent tax transfer for their schools and hospitals. But he didn't say how he would do that fairly, because Western provinces actually have already dropped a lot of their barriers. It's the more protectionist jurisdictions in the other half of the country that might reap more from his proposal.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. The trade war is having a ripple effect on the financial markets, and this morning shares across the European and Asian markets are down. There are growing economic concerns about the incoming U.S. tariffs. As the CBC's senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong reports, stocks and currency exchanges are bracing for a volatile day.
The closing bell last Friday feels like a lifetime ago. Back then, stocks sold off on news that U.S. President Donald Trump was probably going ahead with some tariffs. The Dow fell 0.8%, the S&P shed 0.5%. Then came the weekend's earthquakes.
You see the power of the tariff. I mean, the tariff is good, and nobody can compete with us because we have by far the biggest piggy bank.
Today will be the financial market's first real chance to price in the cost of a global trade war. Market analysts like Carl Shimada, chief market strategist at the financial services firm Corpay, say investors did not seem to believe this was really going to happen.
I think markets were not taking Trump seriously or literally.
In slapping sweeping tariffs on trillions of dollars worth of trade, Trump has upended decades of work to integrate global economies. Undoing that integration will come at a cost. And Shimada says markets didn't think President Trump would follow through with these kinds of threats.
The reality was that, it seemed as if whatever Trump was going to do, that it was going to be market friendly, that it would not impact how businesses, operated.
But the news won't necessarily lead to a sharp sell-off. American tech companies have driven stock market gains, and they won't be hit by Trump's tariff wars. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Los Angeles is still in fire recovery mode. That was reflected in last night's Grammy Awards. The show, which was hosted in LA, paid tribute to first responders. Steve Futterman has more.
Just weeks after parts of Los Angeles were ravaged by fires, the Grammy show opened with a salute to the city. The highlight of the night came at the very end. On her fifth try, Album of the Year finally went to Beyonce. Beyonce won for her country album, Cowboy Carter.
I just feel very full and very honored. It's been many, many years.
Sharing in Beyonce's Album of the Year win was Canadian producer Dave Amlang, best known for being part of the Montreal-based band The Stills. Record and Song of the Year both went to Kendrick Lamar for Not Like Us.
They not like us. They not like us.
In which he continues his feud with Drake.
They not like us.
It's the first time a rapper has won both awards. He paid tribute to those in LA who live in the areas hardest hit by the fires.
Most importantly, the people and the families out in the Palisades and Altadena.
Chapel Roan was named Best New Artist. There were several references to ongoing political issues in the U.S. Alicia Keys talked about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. She called it a gift, not a threat. Steve Futterman for CBC News at the Grammy Awards in Los Angeles.
As we heard from Steve, Beyonce had many big wins last night, and she also made history.
I'll be your shotgun rider till the day I die.
That's Two Most Wanted, sung by Miley Cyrus and Beyonce. The song won for Best Country Duo Performance. That makes Beyonce the first black woman to win a Grammy in a country music category. She's also the most awarded and most nominated artist in Grammy history.
Till the day I die.
And that is the latest from World Report. Listening to World Report is the easiest way to stay on top of the news. But we need help getting the word out. You can help today by hitting the follow button on your preferred podcast app. I'm Marcia Young.
I really enjoyed the Grammys last night. Some big stage shows, some big performances. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. Thanks so much for joining us on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this snowy picture behind me. That's snow grains in the air, not fog. It's cold out there. The high is minus 18 today. We're at minus 20 right now with wind chill feels kind of like minus 34. So bundle up. You're probably already out and covered already and used to it. Well, let's talk about what's coming up in this half hour of the program. A North End City Councillor will join us to talk about how he would like to see a section of Main Street transformed from vacant to vibrant. So if you look north of Higgins, there's empty lots, there's piles of rubble. They become too common in that part of the city. Multiple fires, most recently the Sutherland. How does that area of Winnipeg revive, and is housing the biggest part of what the answer is? We'll talk to Ross Eady about it. Also, the head of the Chamber of Commerce for Manitoba is going to be joining us as well to tell us what he's been thinking over the weekend, who he's been hearing from, and more your comments on the tariffs as well. Heather Wells is in with her headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, Premier Rob Canoe says Trump's tariffs are not just an attack on Canada's economy. He says they're an attack on Canadian sovereignty. Canoe has announced Manitoba will remove U.S. booze from Liquor Mart shelves tomorrow as part of the province's response.
This means that we are going to be taking $80 million out of the U.S. economy. This is $80 million that we won't be spending in the United States of America.
Canoe encourages Manitobans to buy Canadian. We're going to hear from some Manitobans outside a Liquor Mart coming up. And a United Church in Brandon is planning a day of pride after being targeted with threatening messages and vandalism. Those stories and more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, I mentioned clear, cold, windy, a high of minus 18. It'll feel like minus 34, and right now minus 20. The commute's been cooperating. If you need to call us, 788-3093. Well, I just mentioned the Sutherland Hotel, and when it burned down a few weeks ago in Winnipeg on Main Street, it became just the most recent building in that section to be reduced to rubble. A growing number of vacant lots stand between boarded-up buildings as you make your way north from Higgins to Burroughs. Business owners like Astrid Lichty are holding out hope that the area will one day make a comeback. She's run Cosmopolitan Forests for over 4 decades with her family before her. She says the business at the corner of Main and Pritchard has at least $70,000 in damages from vandalism in recent years.
You know, I've had customers in the last 10 years or so ask me, would you consider moving? And the answer is no. I have a great tie to this area and to these buildings. And for me, it's an emotional hurdle to get over, and I'm not there yet. I'd say hope is at the end of the string and hanging on. That's what I'd say. I'd say, yeah. It's a glimmer at this point. And I think there needs to be a younger generation of entrepreneurs. But so much is online now that bricks and mortar businesses are suffering everywhere, right? Maybe it should be with the Housing Accelerator Fund, where they make it a mandate that the empty lots become 3 or 4 story residential housing units. Why not? Why is it going everywhere but here? We have lots of empty lots. We have very old, but perhaps can be rehabilitated solid buildings. Those are things to consider too, right? That would certainly help.
Astrid Lichty speaking to us last week. Corey Funk was out interviewing her in her shop. She owns Cosmopolitan Florist, and that is on Main Street, has been for more than 4 decades. Ross Eady is with us this morning, Winnipeg City Councillor for the Minarski Ward. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
What would it take to turn empty lots on that stretch of Main Street into more housing, in your view?
Well, Astrid mentioned the Housing Accelerator Fund. Just so you know, although this building has not been torn down, you're familiar with the church that burnt. Right in front of it at Main Street is another building that really is ready to be torn down and build something new. So there was a developer I met with who was looking at building housing there with commercial on the main floor and then 3 floors of affordable housing. Also with some, mixed affordable housing. And their application it was outside of downtown. It wasn't successful, but I think it was reported in the news there was over 200 applications. So the Housing Accelerator Fund can be part of the solution, but what it requires is the private sector, developers, or whoever, who want to come forward and build the housing and maybe at the lower level some commercial. But Astrid wasn't asked is true. It's hard to get a business to move into that section on Main Street because there's a lot of different kinds of crime and violence, and customers don't feel comfortable.
What about from a business point of view of, their investment, getting a return on their investment for a business, or whether they're developing a housing for people? What can the city do to sort of entice developers to an area of Winnipeg where, as she outlined, she sometimes, you can't get insurance even? Is there something that the city can do to help spur more investment?
Well, I think you heard we just passed our city budget. I think you've heard that the city is really short on money because of past decisions or what have you. It doesn't matter. The reality is right now we have huge needs for money to be able to provide the services that Winnipeggers depend on. So, I mean, we could try to provide more incentives. This is more vacant, derelict housing where, we could provide some grants of, say, $18,000 because renovations are very expensive now. In terms of the private dwellers, I mean, the new owner who is going to be taking title was talking about doing housing in the old building. Well, it would have taken a lot of money, and they're looking for subsidies is really what it is. And again, we have federal dollars called the Housing Accelerator Fund. There's also the Rapid Housing. I think that's almost over, and that has seen some buildings on Main Street or close to Main Street turned into housing. So really, other than providing some direct incentives, I guess you could provide some tax incremental financing or something like that, but it requires private investors. And I said, Marcy, I explained this to you back in 2010 when I was first elected on Selkirk Avenue at the Windmill.
Yeah.
Until we resolve the social issues, the ills all around, like Main Street where we are right now, or on Selkirk, until we resolve that, private investors aren't coming in.
So let me play you something else from Astrid Lichty. And yes, we did speak at the Windmill. That was like 15 years ago. And we've spoken over the years, Councillor Eadie, because it has been an ongoing challenge, of course. But there have been solutions that some in the area say have worked in the past, sort of to improve things. I just want to play you 30 more seconds of Astrid because she was bringing up initiatives that she actually would like to see returned. Here's what she said.
About 25 years ago, with the arsons that were happening in the spate of the North End, hundreds of thousands of dollars went into programs such as the COPP program through MPIC and other foot patrol programs working with Winnipeg Police. There was a special arson squad. MPIC had a special stolen automobile squad, and we had patrol officers. And also police in schools. So it was a multi-pronged approach, and it really made a dent. It made a difference.
I know those initiatives, as she said, I appreciate they're 25 years ago, but do you think there are initiatives that you would like to see back that could improve the situation in your area?
Well, let me talk about that because, like, foot patrols and that. So 25 years ago, we had a huge vacant derelict arson problem with not so much on Main Street, but more in the residential areas adjacent. Today, we have the Mama Bear Clan who do some patrolling in the area. I'm not sure about the Bear Clan since they moved off of Selkirk Avenue. Some people have said they haven't seen them that much, but we know they're out there working in the North End because I have friends who volunteer for the Bear Clan. So, and we had ambassador programs over the years for the business. So, I mean, those things help, but like, what are you doing? You got people with severe addictions. You're wasted on meth, and you come into a restaurant almost totally naked, and you steal some car keys, and you take off with somebody's motor vehicle. That's happened on Main Street. So, like, how do you do it? Foot Patrol isn't necessarily going to be able to deal with that. Now, we have a number of issues, a number of initiatives now coming from the province to deal with those social ills. We could use more Foot Patrol. I think the Winnipeg Police Service is restoring Foot Patrol back to Main Street and Selkirk Avenue. I hope. There's not enough, as a matter of fact. So we do need more of that. We have the new transit security happening, and they're going to have to spend a lot of time. They have to spend a little time on the streets around the bus stops too, because there's lots of crime and stuff happening there and on the buses. So, I mean, there's things happening. We could use more. With the Selkirk Avenue Biz, the North End Biz hasn't really been at this meeting, but West Broadway is looking at trying to combine a bunch of various business improvement zones to see if we can't pool some money so that we could have patrols like they do downtown.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eadie. Obviously, we'll speak again about this, and thank you for telling us about some of the efforts that are being already made in your ward.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk to you
You're
again.
welcome.
Thank you so much. Ross Eadie giving us an update on some of the initiatives and also some of the challenges they're facing in that part of Winnipeg. He's a city councillor for the Minarski ward. And if you want to hear the interview Corey did with Astrid Lichty, longtime business owner on Main Street, that aired Friday, and you can hear it on our app. It is now 8:22 a.m. All right, it is 8:22 a.m. Let's talk tariffs. We've been talking them all morning from different perspectives. This is obviously one of the top stories. Chuck Davidson joins us, the head of the president and CEO of Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Marcy.
All right, so Chuck, let's listen to what the Premier had to say over the weekend. Here's Wab Canoe.
We have to stand up for jobs in our province. We have to stand up for manufacturers and the ag industry and the energy industry and everyone else who's going to be threatened by these tariffs. And it's very, very important that we stand up for ourselves, not just as Manitobans, but also as Canadians. The idea of one Manitoba takes on renewed importance. As we head into this period of tariffs, some of our fellow Manitobans are going to feel the impacts right away. For other Manitobans and in other industries, it may take some time, but we all need to stand together, shoulder to shoulder, to be there for one another. The situation that we are confronted with, yes, this is a trade dispute. This is an economic threat. But we should also be very, very clear-eyed about the threat that this poses to our sovereignty as an independent country.
So that was our Premier Wab Canoe speaking yesterday about the imposed 25% tariff on Canadian goods. It kicks in tomorrow. Donald Trump has also announced that there will be a lower tariff on energy at 10%. Chuck, what are you hearing from businesses in our province from over the weekend?
Well, obviously there's concern about this in terms of what the impacts are going to be, when it's going to be felt. The fact that we're continuing to go down that path makes no sense to anyone. Again, we're even hearing the same from the other side of the border. When you talk to organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and manufacturing organizations who are also opposed to this tariff war that we're going through because of the relationship we've had the long-standing relationship and the trade relationship we've had between the two countries for as long as we have, and the fact that we have a free trade agreement that's already in place, that's working well, that's benefiting both sides of the border. All we're seeing is this is a lose-lose for Canada and for the United States. And there's just this uncertainty as to why we're going down this path.
Listeners are writing to us, one of them from Steinbach saying, they work for window manufacturer. They're worried. Obviously, we've heard from those in the pharmaceutical businesses and the ag businesses that have spoken to CBC about their concerns. What businesses, either big or small, or industries are you watching across Manitoba or hearing from that are kind of the top of the list for concern?
And again, it's going to be those. It's going to be a lot of manufacturing companies. It's going to be a lot in the ag industry as well. Organizations like pork producers that export close to 90% of their goods south of the border or to other jurisdictions. These are ones that there's concern with this tariff coming in place in terms of what that's going to mean, because it's not as simple as just sort of deciding that, okay, we're not going to do business with the U.S. anymore. You have to have, and from these U.S. consumers, they're going to have other companies or countries that they're going to deal with to make up the difference. And if they can't, then they're going to continue to rely on those relationships. And that's going to be dependent on, who's going to end up paying for those tariffs. Is it going to be, obviously, it's going to be the U.S. consumers, but at the same time, they're going to be looking for reductions and making sure that those relationships continue with Canadian businesses. So this is where the next couple of months are going to be extremely interesting, and I think it's important. And I think one of the things that President Trump has done is he's really woken up Manitoba and Canadian governments in terms of, okay, we need to be united. We need to make sure that we've got a consistent message, and we need to focus on growing our own economy. And that's a strong message that the business community is sending as well, is that we need to focus on that.
Okay, so I need to read a couple of things to you that have been developing this morning. So I know that you had said that you hope it doesn't get to the point Canada needs a bailout. We had a listener write in, Rick Koss, who is a longtime business owner here, who said he wants to see a commitment from Ottawa to use all or most of the tariffs collected to support the many businesses that will be severely impacted in the trade war. So he's saying we should be thinking about a bailout. But when I posed that question this morning to Dwayne Bratt, who's professor of political science at Mount Royal University, and he's works specifically in U.S.-Canada relations, and I talked about the idea of a bailout. He actually, this is going to sound very, very harsh, but he said, effectively, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said that to spend the money on bailout packages quickly without thinking this through could be a waste of money, because the sad reality in his view is that these tariffs could shut down businesses that won't make comebacks. So you have to think very carefully about bailout packages. What's your view on on bailouts this morning?
Yeah, and I think I agree to a certain extent. I think there does need to be some supports in the short term, but I think in the longer term, this is the real opportunity to, where do we focus on how do we grow our economy? And so there's some certain things that we can look at. We can look at reducing internal trade barriers. So these are things that we can control ourselves, and where we're making some of those key investments as well is on infrastructure. So it's not simply about, bailing out businesses and to his point, that may not be profitable in the long run. It's how do we make key investments to make sure that the impact of these trade barriers are going to be less impactful? How can we find new targets? How can we move forward with products? How can we be more profitable here in Canada?
So how poised is Manitoba to do that? Do you believe that we've had a strong enough, economic view in terms of, I should say, investment, development, pivoting? We've always had a diversified economy, but how quickly can Manitoba actually change if someone's saying, wow, my business right now is not going to be viable if I lose the States?
It is going to, there's no question, it is going to take time, which is why you are going to have some supports in place to help these businesses in the meantime. But at the same time is focusing on what are the different things that we can control. Where do we need to make key investments, whether it be in infrastructure, whether it be in workforce training? How do we support some of these businesses so that they can kind of get through this? Whether it's looking at additional markets, that's going to be a key component of this as well. And continuing to have those conversations south of the border. Like, as I mentioned, that we're hearing time and time again, whether it's even Republican members are not necessarily all in favor of going down this path, because they also recognize the negative implications that they're going to have on U.S. consumers as a result of this. So it's continuing to have that dialogue in these challenging times, but also looking at things that we can control ourselves and trying to drive our own economy at the same time.
We've got a question that came in, actually, and I just want to play it. This came off the listener line, Chuck. So let's have a listen, because a lot of Manitobans have more questions than answers this morning, but this one has to do with Portage-la Prairie.
Good morning. This is Liz from near Portage-la Prairie, and I'm wondering something. I was driving by the Simplot plant just outside of Portage the other night, and I was wondering, it's more a question of how it's going to work on a company like Simplot, which is owned by Americans. It's stocked with Canadian potatoes for the most part, mostly from Manitoba here, although every once in a while, if there's a shortage, they go down to North Dakota and bring up some potatoes to keep Simplot plant production going. And then apparently the potatoes that are processed there are turned into French fries for the American market, and shipped back down to be distributed, from here to Chicago and beyond. So how is that going to work with the tariff?
Can you answer that, Chuck, or are those some of the conversations you're having with...
Yeah, but that's exactly the point. That just shows how intertwined our relationship with the U.S. is, because your caller's absolutely right, that those potatoes that are being grown in Manitoba, processed at Simplot are typically going to the south of the border into the United States. So those United States companies would be paying the tariff on that as well. So what are the other options? Does Simplot look in terms of how do we make sure that what we're processing here in Canada stays in Canada? Again, those are some of the challenging times and why a lot of companies are concerned about this at the end of the day, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because we've had this relationship for as long as we have that has worked well. Putting these tariffs in place, which is why I say again, it's a lose-lose. It's a lose on both sides of the border and makes no sense in terms of how we go forward with this.
All right, Chuck. I mean, frankly, we could talk every day because we don't know where this story is going to be going. But thank you very much for being here this Monday morning. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Marcy.
President and CEO of Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's -20. A frigid first week of February in Winnipeg. A high today of just -18, and it's going to be windy as well. With U.S. tariffs on Canada set to go into effect at midnight tonight, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke on the phone this morning with President Donald Trump. The details of the discussion have not been released, but on social media, Trump says he will speak again with Trudeau later this afternoon. One possible concerning note, Trump's Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett has told CNBC it appears Canada may have misunderstood the language of Trump's executive order on tariff action. Well, in the meantime, goodbye Kentucky bourbon, goodbye California wine. U.S. liquor products are being removed from the Manitoba liquor store shelves. Premier Wab Kinew says it's just one response to sweeping tariffs about to be imposed by the U.S.
If our large trading partner to the south begins kicking sand in our face, then we have to stick up for ourselves and we have to push back.
Manitoba exports about $15 billion worth of goods and services to the United States every year. Now, some anger on the streets of Winnipeg to Donald Trump's tariffs. Speaking outside a liquor mart in Osborne Village, Peter Mason suggested a stronger response.
Canada, in my opinion, should just cut off the gas, cut off the water, cut off the electricity, because we supply almost all their northern states. And I think if we did a smart move like this, it might wake Trump up a little bit.
Another shopper, Herb Neufeld, doesn't think removing American booze will accomplish much, calling it mostly symbolic. Some other Manitobans say it's time to make some major changes to shopping and travel habits. Mike Weisner says this is a turning point for Canadians.
This is one of those moments where we have to kind of look and support Canadians and Canadian producers and local. So I'm going to try to do my part as much as I can, whether it's purchasing local foods and products that are made in Canada or produced here in Canada.
Weisner says he's also reconsidering any travel to the U.S., wanting instead, he says, to keep his money in Canada. Now, Manitoba's farmers are bracing for impact. Chris Davison is head of the Canola Council of Canada. The industry produces 18 million metric tons of canola products, most of which goes to the U.S.
Farmers will unfortunately feel the impact of this in a number of different ways. In terms of the marketing options that they have for their crop and the potential price that they can receive for that. So the impacts will be very real in terms of cash flow and profitability.
Davison says it is unclear how Canadian counter tariffs will benefit Canadian farmers. Meanwhile, today, Ontario Premier Doug Ford has announced another response to Donald Trump's tariff plans. Ford says he will rip up a $100 million contract with Elon Musk to deliver high-speed internet to remote areas of the province. The agreement is designed to have Musk's Starlink satellite internet system delivered to more than 15,000 Northern Ontario homes. Ford says the province won't do business with people who are, quote, hell-bent on destroying our economy. We'll keep on top of that story throughout the day. Celebrating after the ceasefire. Video of children in Gaza dancing. Hala Kofa, a Palestinian refugee in Winnipeg, received the video on WhatsApp from a friend in Gaza. They have also shared bleaker videos of broken down homes and rubble and human remains. She says her loved ones hope to go back to Rafah, despite what's happened in the last 15 months.
When they say that they have no food, when they have no water, when they have no medicine, when they have no hospitals, when they have no shelter, when it was raining and the mattresses and all the clothes that they had were literally floating, what do you respond to that?
Kafa says she is broken and lives with survivor's guilt. A Brandon United Church is prouder than ever, even in the face of vandalism and harassment. Brandon's Knox United Church is known as a safe and loving place for the 2S LGBTQ+ community. But recently, it's met some pushback for its advocacy, like nasty messages online and threatening phone calls. Laura Cruikshank is with the church's Affirm committee.
We're seeing more reaction to some of the events we might hold, to some of the things that are going on in the community. People are concerned about some of the hateful kind of speech around people in the 2S LGBTQIA+ community.
Cruikshank says the church has adjusted some of its safety protocols. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day, the latest on the Trump tariff threats, the trade war, and Canada's response. Just stay in step with that story at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells and Megan Ketchison and Joni Nicolo, our news department, big thanks to them this morning. In addition, the producers who worked on items specifically on this Monday morning show, Issa Kixon, producer Donna Carrero, associate producer Calcada Mulugeta, and associate producer Corey Funk. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson, and of course our amazing live team today. Woohoo! Marshall Hodgins pulling out the Monday morning teching for Abby. It was a busy one. Thank you, Marshall. Big thanks to May McKillop, who was filling in for Corey as well. I really appreciate your work today. May was directing the show, covering the commute, and doing all kinds of stuff behind the scenes. And big thanks to Kevin Ipatebo, as always, who holds it down on YouTube, our producer, if you watch the show online. Well, we're leaving you with a reminder to bundle up with those wind chills around -35. A commute? Look at that. Not a call to the commuter line. It's pretty good. Maybe we can drive in winter after all, Manitoba. Take care and be well. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. And coming up next, it is The Current. Stay with us.